My wife's confession destroyed the peace I didn't know I was clinging to. I've been sitting on this for months now, and no matter how many times I try to move past it, I can't. It's like someone took a snapshot of the exact moment my world cracked, and now it just replays every night in my head, over and over. It started one random Wednesday evening. No fight, no tension, no warning, just me, coming home from work, dropping my bag by the door, and finding my wife sitting at the kitchen table like she'd been waiting for hours. The kind of waiting that has weight to it. Her name's Jenna. We've been married for 9 years, together for 12. We built a quiet life, house in suburban Ohio, 2 dogs, a backyard with a half-finished deck project I kept promising I'd finish. She was my best friend, genuinely. The kind of woman who could make folding laundry feel like an inside joke. So when she said, "We need to talk," my first thought wasn't cheating. I thought maybe she was upset about bills, or maybe she wanted to talk about how distant I'd been since work got busier. I'd have taken any of those, but not this. She said it softly, almost like she was trying to protect me from the words themselves. I slept with someone else. I didn't even process it at first. My brain tried to rewrite it into something else, like, slept with someone else? Maybe she meant she crashed at a friend's place? But her face told me everything. Her hands were trembling. Her voice cracked on someone. I just sat there, didn't yell, didn't move. I think I just stared at her like she was a stranger who'd walked into my house. When I finally spoke, I asked the only thing I could manage, why? She said she didn't know, that it happened once. Months ago, during a work trip. She'd been drinking. They'd kissed. Then it went further. She told me she didn't plan it, that it meant nothing, that she's hated herself ever since. She said she told me because she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. And that's what really broke me. Because I realized she hadn't told me for me. She told me for her to lighten her own guilt. I didn't say that then, though. I just nodded, numb, and told her I needed air. I walked out and sat in my truck for what must have been an hour. Just staring at the steering wheel, it felt like someone had cut a wire inside me. I didn't even cry that night. I went back in, told her I needed space, and slept in the guest room. The next morning, she was gone to work like nothing had happened. She texted me later. "Please don't hate me. The thing is, I don't. I wish I did. Hate would be clean. Hate would give me something sharp to hold on to. Instead, I just feel empty." Days turned into weeks. We started therapy, mostly because she begged. The therapist, an older woman named Dr. Halstead, told us that if there was still love, there was still a chance. But what she didn't account for was that I can't unknow what I know. Every time Jenna touches me now, I picture someone else's hands on her. Every time she says she loves me, my mind whispers, "But you loved him too," even if just for a moment. And yet she's trying, I'll give her that. She deleted all her social media, switched departments at work, even gave me her phone passwords. She's doing everything right on paper, but it's like the paper itself is burned. I find myself obsessing over the smallest details. Was it better? Did he make her laugh? Did she think of me while it was happening? Did she shower before coming home that night? I've asked some of those questions, not all. Some answers I don't want, but the ones I did get didn't help. She said it wasn't about me, that it was a stupid, selfish mistake. But when someone you love betrays you, it always becomes about you. You can't not internalize it, the weirdest part. Before she told me we were fine, maybe not perfect, but happy enough. We'd just come back from a trip to Michigan. She'd posted a photo of us smiling by the lake. I look at that picture now and realize it was taken after she cheated. She was already carrying the secret. I can't stop wondering if I'd rather she never told me. If ignorance really is bliss, because before that night, I thought I had a good life. Now every memory feels tainted. Every "I love you" feels like it has an invisible footnote. Except that one time my friends don't know. My parents don't either. I can't bear the thought of everyone seeing me as the guy who got cheated on and stayed. I still wear my wedding ring. But some days it feels heavier than usual. A few nights ago, she came into the guest room while I was half asleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, started crying quietly, and said, "Please, can you just hold me?" I wanted to, God, I wanted to, but I couldn't, I told her. "I don't know who I'm holding anymore," she broke down, and I just stared at the ceiling, listening to her cry, feeling nothing. I know what people will say. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Or, if you love her, you'll forgive her. But both of those things feel hollow right now. Love doesn't just vanish overnight, but it also doesn't protect you from the damage. Some mornings, I catch her looking at me with this haunted expression, Like she's terrified she killed something she can't bring back. And maybe she's right, maybe she did. The irony is, she thought telling me would help us rebuild on honesty. But all it did was burn down the home we had, leaving us standing in the ashes, holding pieces we can't fit together anymore. I still don't know what I'll do. Divorce feels too final, staying feels too painful. I'm stuck in this limbo of half love and half resentment, and every night, when I close my eyes, I hear her voice saying, I couldn't live with the guilt. I wish she'd just lived with it, because now I'm the one who can't update. It's been about 5 months since that night Jenna told me the truth, and I figured I'd post an update because I'm not the same person I was when I wrote that first one. I don't think I'll ever be, to be honest. After I made that post, things got darker before they got even remotely clearer. Therapy continued for a while, but every session started feeling like we were just spinning in circles. Her saying she was sorry, me saying I didn't know how to move forward, and the therapist trying to guide us through rebuilding trust. But you can't rebuild something when one person's still standing in the wreckage, staring at the ruins, refusing to move. That was me. The night that changed everything again happened about 2 months after that first post. I came home from work later than usual, exhausted, just wanting silence. Jenna had cooked dinner, my favorite chicken parmesan, and she'd lit candles like it was a date night. It should have been sweet, but all I could think about was how performative it felt, like she was trying to rehearse normal again. We sat down, and after a few bites, she said she wanted to talk about the future. I told her I didn't want to. Not right now, she said. We can't keep living in limbo, Mark. I need to know what you want. I didn't have an answer then. I still don't really have one now, but something about her tone, calm, but desperate, pushed me to say what had been sitting in my throat for months. I want to stop pretending this can go back to what it was. She froze, fork halfway to her mouth. I think she already knew it. But hearing me say it out loud hit harder. She didn't argue, just nodded and said, okay. And then she started crying. Not loud sobs this time, but silent tears. Like she'd run out of ways to apologize that night. I slept in our bed for the first time in weeks. Not because we made up, but because I didn't want her to cry alone. I lay next to her, both of us staring in opposite directions. And for the first time, I realized how heavy silence can be a week later. She suggested we take a break. Her words, not mine. Not a breakup, she said. Just space. She went to stay with her sister in Indiana for a while. That was the first time in years I had the house to myself. And honestly, it was both freeing and miserable. Freeing because I didn't have to perform anymore. Miserable because the quiet made me think too much. I'd walk into the kitchen and see her mug, her hairbrush on the counter, her slippers by the bed. It was like living in a ghost story. Around that time, I started going out with my friend Tyler again. Grabbing beers, watching games, just trying to remember what normal felt like. He doesn't know the full story. I told him we were taking time apart. I can tell he suspects more, but he's kind enough not to pry. Then something unexpected happened. Jenna sent me a handwritten letter, 6 pages long. I hadn't seen her handwriting since before everything blew up. Just texts and therapy notes. It felt strangely intimate, opening that envelope. The letter wasn't another apology, not really. It was her trying to explain herself without excuses. She said she'd been feeling disconnected from me for a long time, like I was physically there but emotionally miles away. She said the affair wasn't about the guy. It was about chasing a version of herself she thought she'd lost. She wrote, "You didn't fail me, Mark, I failed myself. But I also failed to tell you I was drowning before I grabbed someone else's hand." I must have read that line 100 times. I don't know if it made things better or worse. Part of me felt sympathy. I remember how checked out I'd become last year, how work consumed me, how I barely looked up from my laptop some nights. But another part of me thought, then why didn't you just talk to me? I haven't replied to that letter yet. I keep it in the drawer next to my bed. Some nights I take it out and read it, and for a moment I almost miss her. Then the image of her with someone else flashes across my mind like a reflex. And the moment's gone. Last weekend she came by to pick up some things. Winter clothes, a few books, the dog's medical records. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. No yelling, no crying, just talking about everything and nothing. At one point, she looked around the living room and said softly, "You've kept everything the same?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I was waiting to see if I should change it." She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. Before she left, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever find our way back?" I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I honestly don't know. The truth is, there's still love there. It's just twisted now. Tangled up in grief and resentment and what-ifs. I still dream about her sometimes. And when I wake up for a few seconds, I forget what happened. Those are the hardest mornings, because I have to lose her all over again. Therapy taught me something I didn't expect. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean staying. Sometimes it means letting both people stop bleeding from the same wound. So that's where I am now. In the in-between. Not divorced, not together, just existing. Trying to learn how to breathe without bitterness in every inhale. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that truth isn't always the noble thing people make it out to be. Sometimes it's just a grenade disguised as honesty. And once it's thrown, no one walks away unscarred. Jenna wanted to clear her conscience. I wanted to believe love could survive it. But maybe neither of us was right. Still, I can't bring myself to hate her. Maybe that's my curse. Maybe it's my strength. I haven't figured that part out yet. All I know is, I wish I'd never had to find out what forgiveness costs. Because it's so much more than anyone ever tells you. Final update. It's been just over a year since Jenna told me about the affair. I honestly didn't think I'd make it this far without completely falling apart. But here I am. Different. Scarred. But standing. A lot's changed since my last update. Jenna and I officially separated 3 months after she went to stay with her sister. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no slammed doors. Just two people sitting on opposite sides of a kitchen table that used to be filled with laughter. Realizing there wasn't anything left to save. We met at the same lawyer's office where we signed our marriage license 9 years ago. That irony wasn't lost on me. I remember staring at her hands as she signed the papers. Still wearing her wedding ring, even though I'd taken mine off weeks earlier. When the clerk asked if we wanted to finalize that day, Jenna hesitated for a second, like she was hoping I'd stop it. But I didn't. Afterward, we walked out together, stood by her car for a few minutes. She hugged me. Not romantic, not desperate, just sad, like she was saying goodbye to the version of us that used to exist. She whispered, "I'm sorry," one last time, and I said, "I know." That was the end. The first few weeks after the divorce were quiet in a way that hurt. I didn't realize how much of my routine had been built around her. Her coffee mug in the morning, her playlist in the car, the way she'd hum when she cooked. Silence became this heavy living thing in the house. I started keeping the TV on just so I didn't have to hear my own thoughts. Eventually, I sold the house. Couldn't stand walking past the kitchen where she confessed or the guest room where I slept for months pretending it was temporary. I moved into a smaller place downtown, 1-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Fresh walls, no ghosts. I thought starting over would fix me. But grief doesn't work like that. It follows you, it hides in songs, in smells, in random places you don't expect. I'd walk past a bakery and suddenly remember how Jenna loved lemon tarts. I'd see a commercial for the beach and think about our trip to North Carolina, the last time I saw her truly happy. For a while, I thought about dating again, but I couldn't bring myself to. Not because I still wanted her back, I don't. But because I don't want to carry that broken trust into something new. The idea of trying to love again just feels exhausting right now. The weirdest part? I don't hate her anymore. I don't even think I resent her. Somewhere along the way, the anger just burned itself out. I started realizing that holding on to it was keeping me tied to her. To the betrayal, letting go doesn't mean forgiving everything. It means finally choosing peace over punishment. I did see her one more time, about 2 months ago. Totally by accident, I was grabbing coffee on a Saturday morning, and she walked in with a friend. I froze. She looked different. Shorter hair, more tired around the eyes, but still Jenna. We made eye contact. She smiled, small and uncertain, and I nodded. That was it. No words, no awkward small talk. Just two people who once shared everything, reduced to a polite exchange between strangers. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. It just felt final. After she left, I sat there for a while, finishing my coffee, thinking about how much life can change in a year. How you can go from planning anniversaries to signing divorce papers, from building a future to learning how to live alone again. There's something oddly liberating about realizing you survived what you thought would destroy you. The nights where I couldn't sleep, where I'd replay every detail of that confession. They don't haunt me the same way anymore. The memory's still there, but it's dulled. Like a scar instead of an open wound. I've been focusing on small things lately. Going on runs, cooking for myself, visiting my parents more often. I even started therapy alone this time, not to save a marriage, but to rebuild myself. My therapist told me something that stuck. You can love who someone was and still accept they're no longer that person. That's where I am now. I loved who Jenna was before that night. I probably always will. But she's not that person anymore, and neither am I. Sometimes I wonder if I'd still rather not have known. But I think knowing, as painful as it was, forced me to stop living on autopilot. It made me confront who I was. Someone who'd rather avoid conflict than face it. Someone who thought love was enough to keep everything intact. It wasn't, I guess the real tragedy isn't that she cheated, it's that we both stopped showing up long before she did. We just didn't notice until the damage was done. I don't think she's a monster. I think she's human. Flawed, scared, impulsive, and I'm human too. Trying to forgive myself for not seeing the cracks sooner. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that closure doesn't come from the other person. It comes the day you finally stop asking why and start asking what now. And as for what now, I'm living quietly, peacefully, and maybe for the first time in years. Honestly, I don't wish her pain. I don't wish her happiness either. I just hope she finds whatever truth she was chasing that night. As for me, I found mine. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Stories number 2. She tried to bring her boyfriend on our mother-daughter trip. I'm 27, and for the last few years, my mom and I have had this tradition of taking a trip together every spring. It started after my dad passed away. Something to lift her spirits and give us both time to reconnect without the noise of everyday life. It wasn't fancy at first. We'd rent a small cabin near a lake or take a road trip to another state, but it became something we both looked forward to. Our little mother-daughter thing. This year was supposed to be extra special. I'd been working overtime and saved up enough to cover the trip completely. My mom, Denise, had been through a tough breakup last fall, and I wanted to surprise her with something that felt refreshing and peaceful. I booked a week in Asheville, North Carolina. Mountain views, cozy Airbnb, hiking trails, local art shops. It was going to be perfect. When I told her, she was thrilled. She even cried a little on the phone, saying how much it meant to her that I still wanted to do this even as I got older and busier. Everything was great, until about 3 weeks before we were set to leave. She called me one evening, sounding hesitant but chipper. "Sweetheart, I was wondering," she said. "How would you feel if Gary came with us?" Gary is her boyfriend of about 6 months. I've met him twice. He's not awful, but he's a lot. He's one of those overly loud, self-proclaimed fun guys who cracks jokes that always go a little too far, interrupts every conversation to make it about him, and acts like everyone adores him. He once made a comment about my resting serious face at dinner, then laughed it off like it was a compliment. I tried to keep my tone even. "Mom, I thought this was our mother-daughter trip." "Well, yes, but Gary's been wanting to see the mountains too," she said quickly, "and I thought it might be nice for you to get to know him better. He's part of my life now." I reminded her that we'd specifically planned this as a bonding trip. Just the two of us. It wasn't supposed to be a couple's getaway or a group trip. It was our thing. She got quiet for a second before saying, "I just thought it'd be more fun. You two would really hit it off once you had more time together." I told her I wasn't comfortable with that. I had booked everything for 2 people. 1 bed, 1 room, and the trip was meant for us. Not her and Gary. She got defensive immediately, saying I was being controlling and childish. "Life changes, honey," she said. "You can't expect it to stay just you and me forever," I said. I understood, but this one trip was meant to be what it always had been. Time for just the 2 of us. She huffed and said, "Fine, I won't go then." Then she hung up. I didn't hear from her for almost a week. When she finally called, she sounded cold. She said Gary had offered to book his own room, so I wouldn't have to be uncomfortable. She made it sound like a peace offering, but I knew what that meant. He'd still be tagging along everywhere. Hiking, dinners, sightseeing. There'd be no just us moments left. I told her no again. That this trip was about our relationship, not her new one. She said I was punishing her for moving on, that I didn't want her to be happy or have companionship. I told her that wasn't true, but she didn't believe me. It got ugly. She accused me of being jealous, of not wanting to share her. I said it wasn't jealousy, it was about boundaries. She's had relationships before, and I've never cared. But this trip was one of the few traditions that still connected us. She ended the call saying, "If Gary can't come, then I'm not going. I'm not sneaking around like I'm 15, so I ended up going alone." I debated canceling, but everything was paid for, and I needed a break. It was lonely at first, but honestly, I started to enjoy it. I hiked solo, met a few people in local shops, and spent my evenings reading by the fire pit. But there was this constant ache knowing it wasn't supposed to be like that. I sent her pictures, just to show I was thinking of her, and she didn't respond. When I got home, she barely spoke to me. A few days later, she posted pictures on Facebook of a mini getaway she and Gary took to a nearby vineyard. Her caption said, "Sometimes you just have to choose happiness." It felt like a jab. Now it's been 2 months, and things are still tense. She'll answer my texts but never bring up the trip. My brother told me she still thinks I embarrassed her by making a big deal out of something that shouldn't have mattered. But it did matter. That trip was about us. It wasn't about Gary, and it hurt to see her replace something so meaningful with someone she's known for barely half a year. I've tried to reach out again, to explain that it wasn't about hating Gary, just wanting to keep our tradition. But she says she doesn't feel comfortable making plans anymore if I'm going to dictate who's allowed. I don't know how to fix it. I want my mom back. I want the woman who laughed with me on road trips and stayed up drinking wine and watching bad movies. But it feels like Gary's in the middle of everything now, and I'm on the outside looking in. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just let him come, even if it ruined the vibe, just to keep the peace. But another part of me feels like if I'd said yes, I would have lost that special part of our relationship for good. I still don't regret standing my ground, but I hate how lonely it feels to be right. Update. It's been about 5 months since that whole mess with the trip, and I wish I could say things are completely fine now, but they're not. They're complicated. After that awkward stretch of silence, I decided to make the first move. I sent my mom a text asking if she wanted to grab lunch. Just the two of us. No mention of Gary, no pressure, just lunch, she agreed. Though her response was a curt, "Sure, I'm free Thursday." It wasn't exactly warm, but it was something. We met at this small cafe we've been going to for years. When she walked in, I could tell she was guarded. Her posture a little stiff, her smile polite but strained. I tried to keep things light, talked about work, asked about her garden, complimented her new haircut. Slowly, she started to relax. We even laughed a few times. For a moment, it felt like old times. But then the topic of the trip came up. I didn't mean to bring it up. It just slipped out when I mentioned Asheville and how much I liked it there. She sighed and said, "It looked nice. I saw your pictures." I told her I wished she'd been there, and she said, "Well, maybe if you'd been more flexible." I would have been. There it was, the tension resurfacing like it had just been waiting. I told her that I wasn't trying to control her or exclude Gary, but that it was something special between us. She said she understood that, but that she felt like I was judging her for wanting him around. "You made me feel like a teenager sneaking around with a boyfriend," she said quietly. I told her I didn't mean to, but I could tell my words didn't fully land. She said Gary was hurt too, that he thought I didn't like him, that he had wanted to get to know me better and felt rejected. That honestly threw me. I told her it wasn't personal against him. I just wanted to spend time with her, but she said, "You can't keep expecting things to be the way they were before I met him. He's part of my life now. If you love me, you have to accept that." I didn't know what to say. I sat there, staring at my coffee. Trying not to cry, I finally said, "I do love you. I just wish you'd wanted to spend time with me as much as I wanted to spend time with you." The silence that followed hurt more than any argument could have. We parted on okay terms, but things still felt uneasy. A few weeks later, she invited me to dinner at her house with Gary there. I almost said no, but I figured I needed to at least try. Gary greeted me like nothing ever happened. Loud and cheerful, cracking jokes like we were old friends. I could tell he was trying to smooth things over, even if his way of doing it was a little over the top. During dinner, though, I noticed something I hadn't before. My mom kept glancing at him before she spoke, like she was checking his reaction to things. When she laughed, it was just a little too forced. I don't know, something about it felt off. After dinner, Gary went outside to take a call, and I asked her if she was okay. She smiled tightly and said, "Of course, why wouldn't I be?" But she looked tired. Not unhappy exactly, but not herself either. We've seen each other a few times since then, but always with Gary around. It's like he's her shadow now. She hasn't suggested doing anything with just the two of us again. For my birthday, she and Gary took me out to dinner, and she kept saying how glad she was that we were getting along. I smiled and nodded, but it felt hollow. Because the truth is, we weren't really us anymore. Not like before. The weirdest part? My aunt, her sister, pulled me aside recently and said, "Don't take it personally. Your mom's just scared of being alone again." That hit hard. I think that's what this is all about. After my dad died, she clung to the idea of having someone, anyone who could fill that void. Gary's not a bad person, but I think she's scared that if she doesn't let him into every part of her life, he'll leave. I get it. I really do. But it's sad watching her fade into someone else's orbit like that. Still, I'm trying to meet her halfway. I text Gary sometimes about little things, like asking for his barbecue recipe or sending him a funny meme. It's awkward, but he seems to appreciate it. And it's made my mom soften a little toward me again. Last weekend, she mentioned maybe doing a family vacation next year. Me, her, Gary, and my brother. I smiled and said, maybe. I'm not sure what that means yet. But I guess if I want any chance of keeping my relationship with her, I have to accept that some things can't go back to the way they were. Even so, I still miss her. The version of her that was just my mom. The one who'd plan trips with me months in advance and stay up talking about life and love and everything in between. I don't know if that version of us still exists. But I'm not ready to give up on her completely. Maybe next year, I'll plan something small again. A day trip maybe, somewhere nearby. With no strings attached, just me and her. If she says no, then at least I'll know I tried. It's been almost a full year since the whole mother-daughter trip argument, and this feels like the right time for a real final update. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever write one because for a while, things between my mom and me felt permanently cracked. But time, space, and a few uncomfortable truths changed that more than I expected. After that last dinner where I felt like she wasn't quite herself, I pulled back a bit, not in a dramatic way, just quietly. I stopped initiating every conversation. I stopped sending long texts or over-explaining my feelings. I just let her reach out if she wanted to. It was hard, but it gave me perspective. I realized I'd been trying so hard to protect the version of our relationship that existed before Gary. I wasn't letting it evolve. Then a few months later, something unexpected happened. My mom called me one night crying, not the quiet, emotional kind of crying. This was full on. Shaking, barely able to speak, crying. I panicked, thinking something terrible had happened. It turned out Gary had broken up with her, apparently. They'd gotten into a fight about her being too focused on her kids. He told her he wanted to move on to a new chapter with someone who didn't have so much baggage. I could hear the humiliation and heartbreak in her voice. I drove over that night, no questions asked. When I got there, she looked completely drained. Mascara smudged, a half-empty glass of wine on the table. Her hair in a messy bun, for the first time in a long time. She didn't try to keep up that everything's fine facade. We sat on the couch for hours, talking about everything. Gary, Dad, the trip, even the argument we'd had about it. She apologized through tears. She said, I didn't realize how much I was losing myself trying to make someone stay. That line gutted me, because that's exactly what it looked like from the outside. I told her I understood, that I never hated Gary, I just missed her. She said she knew that now, and that she wished she'd listened when I tried to set boundaries instead of seeing it as rejection. For the first time since Dad died, it felt like I had my mom back. Over the next few weeks, we started spending more time together. Little things at first, coffee on Sundays, grocery shopping, movie nights. It wasn't forced, it wasn't awkward, it was easy again. One night, while we were watching some terrible Netflix rom-com, she turned to me and said, you know, I've been thinking about Asheville, about how I ruined that trip. I tried to tell her she didn't need to bring it up, but she insisted. She said, I want to make it up to you next year. Just us. No one else. I didn't realize how much I'd needed to hear that until the words left her mouth. We haven't gone yet, but we're planning it. Same time of year. Same idea. Hiking, relaxing, eating our weight in pastries. It's small, but it feels symbolic. In all of this, I also learned a lot about myself for so long. I thought standing my ground meant holding firm no matter what. But I've learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're just fences with gates you can open when it feels safe. I didn't need to shut my mom out. I just needed to let her come back on her own terms. A few months after the breakup, she told me she started seeing a therapist. She said she wanted to understand why she loses herself in relationships. I'm so proud of her for that. The last time we talked about it, she said, I'm learning that I can be alone and still be whole. That one sentence made every fight, every awkward silence, every tear feel worth it. We've rebuilt something new now. It's not exactly the same as before. Honestly, I don't think it could ever be. But it's deeper, more honest. We don't avoid the hard stuff anymore. She even told me she appreciated that I loved her enough to say no back then. That trip she's planning? This time, she's booking it herself. She texted me a few days ago with a photo of a cabin in Vermont saying, "What do you think of this one? 2 beds, mountain view, no plus ones." I laughed so hard I actually teared up. So, yeah, it was messy. It hurt. But it also brought us back to a place where we could really see each other again. Not as mom and daughter bound by obligation, but as 2 women trying to navigate love, loss, and growth in our own ways. And I think that's the kind of connection my dad would have wanted for us. We don't need a mother-daughter tradition to prove we're close anymore. But I'll still pack my hiking boots and snacks next spring. Just in case, because she kept her promise this time. And so did I. Stories number 3. The inheritance my mom left me tore the family apart. When my mom passed away last year, I thought the hardest part would be losing her. I was wrong. The hardest part has been dealing with what came after. The arguments, the guilt trips, and the way my family completely unraveled over money I never asked for. I'm 29, the only child from my mom's marriage to my dad, who passed when I was little. Mom remarried when I was 9 to a man named Frank, who had 2 kids from his first marriage, Emma and Tyler. They were a few years older than me, and while we weren't particularly close growing up, we were friendly enough. I spent summers tagging along to the mall with Emma and her friends, and Tyler used to help me with homework when I got stuck on math. But after high school, we drifted. They stayed close to their mom, and I stayed close to mine. When Mom got sick 2 years ago, I was the one who took care of her. She had stage 4 ovarian cancer, and it progressed fast. I put a pause on my social life, took time off work, and moved back into her house for nearly a year. Frank was around at first, but eventually started spending more and more time at his daughter's place. To rest, as he put it. I didn't complain. I just handled what needed to be done. Appointments, meds, meals, everything. In her last few months, Mom had a lawyer come to the house to finalize her will. I wasn't part of that meeting. She said she wanted to handle it privately. I didn't even think much of it. I was too focused on making her comfortable. When she passed, Frank was a wreck for a while, and I stayed out of the estate stuff until the lawyer contacted me directly. That's when I found out Mom had left everything. The house, her savings, her car, and a small life insurance policy, entirely to me, not split among the kids, not shared with the family, just me. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake, but the lawyer showed me her signed will, dated a few months before she died. It was crystal clear. Frank wasn't even a beneficiary, and neither were his kids, I'll admit. My first reaction wasn't joy, it was shock, then guilt. I didn't feel like I'd earned everything she left behind. But I also remembered the long nights when I was the only one at her bedside. The way she'd squeeze my hand and whisper that she didn't want me to worry about what comes next. I started to understand that maybe this was her way of saying thank you. Frank didn't see it that way. When I told him about the will, he lost it. Said Mom must have been confused, or not thinking clearly, even though the lawyer confirmed she'd been of sound mind. Then Emma and Tyler started calling me, at first pretending to be concerned, asking if I needed help with the funeral, then slowly pivoting into, so what's going to happen with Mom's estate? When I told them the will left everything to me, Emma went quiet for a second before saying, "That doesn't seem fair." Tyler followed up later that day with a text that said, "We're family, you should want to share." I didn't respond right away. I spent a week sitting with it, going over my finances and the house, trying to decide what was right. The truth is, the money isn't huge. After taxes, funeral costs, and paying off a few of Mom's medical bills, it's enough for a down payment and a bit of security, but not life-changing wealth. Still, to them, it was apparently enough to demand their share. Frank even called a family meeting. I didn't want to go, but part of me hoped it might clear the air. Big mistake. He opened by saying Mom would have wanted her family taken care of equally, which made me clench my jaw. He wasn't there for her final months. He wasn't there when she needed to be lifted into bed, or when she couldn't eat solid food, or when she'd cry and ask me not to let her die alone. So hearing him talk about what she would have wanted felt like a slap in the face. Then Emma chimed in, saying I shouldn't profit from grief. That's when I realized they didn't just feel entitled. They genuinely believed they deserved it. I kept my composure and said calmly, "This isn't about profit. This was Mom's decision. I didn't influence her. I didn't even know what she decided until after she was gone." Tyler asked if I was really okay being the reason this family falls apart. I remember feeling my stomach twist at that, because deep down, I knew the family was already fractured. Mom just hadn't wanted to see it. I told them I wasn't giving up the inheritance. I said I was sorry they felt hurt. But this was what Mom wanted, and I was going to honor that. Frank stood up, slammed his chair back, and said, "Then I hope you enjoy being alone, because you just lost your family. That was the last time I saw them in person." For a while, I questioned if I'd done the right thing. I'd wake up at night, heart pounding, wondering if I was being greedy. But every time I walked through Mom's house, every time I saw the old photo albums, the kitchen she loved, the garden she'd tended, I remembered what she told me one of those last nights. She said, "This house is yours. You've earned peace. Don't let anyone take it from you." Those words have stuck with me. Now, nearly a year later, I've made the place my own. I refinished the kitchen cabinets, planted flowers in the yard, and turned her sewing room into a small office. Sometimes, I still half expect her to walk in with her tea, asking if I've eaten yet. Emma and Tyler haven't reached out since that meeting. I hear bits and pieces through mutual relatives. Emma apparently told people I stole their inheritance, and Tyler's been struggling financially, which just makes the resentment worse. Frank moved out of state to live with his sister. I've stopped trying to justify myself. Mom made her decision, and whether they like it or not, I'm honoring it. She wasn't confused. She was deliberate. She knew who showed up when it mattered. Maybe someday they'll understand that. But even if they don't, I know I did what she wanted. And that's enough for me. It's been about a year and a half since everything went down with the inheritance. And things have shifted, though not in the way I expected. I thought time might cool things off, that eventually people would stop acting like I was some kind of villain who robbed them blind. But instead, the distance between me and my mom's side of the family has just solidified into something permanent. At first, I tried to make peace with that. I told myself that family isn't always blood, that sometimes walking away is what keeps you sane. But grief is a strange thing. It sneaks up when you least expect it. Some nights I'll be sitting in the living room, the one Mom loves so much, and I'll just start thinking about how she would have handled all this if she'd lived a little longer. I think she knew what kind of reaction her will would cause. She'd seen how her husband and his kids behaved, and she must have decided she wasn't going to let them tear through what she'd spent her life building. About 6 months ago, Emma reached out for the first time since that awful family meeting. She sent a short email that said, "I think we should talk. It's time to move on." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't know what move on meant in her head, whether she wanted to apologize, or if she wanted to rehash everything again. I decided to give her a chance. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. I was nervous walking in. She looked older, tired in a way that surprised me. After a few awkward hellos, she got right to the point. She said she was sorry for how things went down, that she'd been angry and hurt and didn't handle it well. Then, almost immediately after that, she added, "But you have to understand how it felt for us to find out Mom left us nothing." The way she said Mom stung, because she wasn't her mom. She'd been my mom's stepdaughter for years. But that word, Mom, felt like it belonged to someone who'd been there when it mattered. I didn't correct her, but I did say, "I understand why you were upset, but I didn't take anything from you." She sighed, nodded, and said she wasn't asking for money, just closure. And for a brief second, I believed her. But as we talked, I could tell she was circling around it again, trying to find a way to make me feel guilty. She mentioned how Tyler was struggling, how Frank had to sell some things after moving, and how Mom probably would have wanted to help. That was my cue to end it. I told her I hoped they were doing okay, but I wasn't going to reopen old wounds. I paid for our coffee, wished her well, and left. She didn't follow up. Since then, I've been trying to focus on my own life. I started taking night classes to finish my master's degree. I've been seeing someone new, a guy named Aaron who's patient and kind in all the ways I didn't realize I needed. He never pries about my family, but when I talk about Mom, he listens like it matters. There's still a part of me that wishes things could have been different. I wish Frank and his kids hadn't turned her death into a fight. I wish we could have grieved together instead of tearing each other apart. But the truth is, Mom made a choice, and in a strange way, her choice revealed who everyone really was. I visit her grave every couple of weeks. Sometimes I bring flowers. Sometimes I just sit there and talk to her like she's still around. The guilt I felt right after her passing has faded. What's left is a quiet kind of understanding, that she trusted me to protect what she left behind. not because it was money or property, but because it was her legacy. And I think I'm finally starting to understand what that responsibility really means. It's not about keeping the house exactly the way she left it, or guarding the inheritance like treasure. It's about living the kind of life she wanted me to have. Peaceful, stable, and free from the constant chaos that used to follow her marriage. For a while, I worried that I'd always feel haunted by how things ended with the family. But lately, when I wake up and walk through the quiet of the house, when I make coffee in the kitchen she designed, I feel something different. Not guilt, not anger, just gratitude. Grateful that I was there when she needed me. Grateful that she trusted me enough to make that choice. And grateful that I finally have the peace she wanted for me all along. It's been almost 3 years since Mom passed, and I can finally say the noise around the inheritance has died down. Not because things magically resolved, but because everyone eventually gave up trying to pull me back into the mess. It's strange how long bitterness can linger, though. For a while, every phone call from an unknown number made my chest tighten, half expecting another guilt trip or veiled threat. Now it's just silence, and honestly, that silence feels like peace. About a year ago, Frank passed away unexpectedly, heart attack. I found out through a mutual acquaintance who used to live next door to him and Mom. The news hit me harder than I expected. For all his selfishness, he was still a big part of my life growing up. Even if most of those memories are tainted now, I didn't go to the funeral. I sent flowers with a short card that just said, "Wishing peace to your family." I meant it. I didn't want to carry hate around anymore. A few months after that, I got a letter from a law office in Illinois. For a second, my stomach dropped. I thought it was going to be another inheritance dispute, but it turned out to be from Frank's estate attorney, apparently, before he died. He left behind a few personal items addressed to specific people, and one of them was for me. It wasn't money. It was a small wooden box. Inside were a few old photographs, me as a kid, sitting on Frank's shoulders at the beach, a picture of all of us at Thanksgiving the year Mom married him, and one of me and Emma at my high school graduation. Underneath them was a short handwritten note that said, "I was angry for the wrong reasons. You were right to protect your mother's wishes. I'm sorry, I just sat there staring at it for a long time. I didn't even realize I was crying until the ink started to blur from the tears hitting the paper. It didn't undo the years of resentment or what he'd done, but it gave me something I didn't realize I needed. Closure." I reached out to Emma after that. We hadn't spoken since the coffee shop meeting that ended so awkwardly. When she picked up, her voice sounded cautious but soft. I told her about the letter, and there was a long pause before she said, "He told us about it before he died. I'm glad you got it." We talked for almost an hour that day. She told me about her new job, how Tyler finally got his own place, how their family had been through a lot since Frank's passing. She didn't apologize again, but she didn't have to. The way she spoke, calmer, quieter, felt like a kind of truce. A few weeks later, she invited me to meet her and Tyler for dinner. I was hesitant, but Aaron encouraged me to go. "You don't have to forgive them completely," he said, "but maybe you'll both feel lighter if you just let go of some of it." Dinner was surprisingly normal. We met at a little Italian place, and for the first half hour, it felt almost like old times before everything went bad. No one brought up the inheritance, or Mom, or the will. We just talked about life, work, travel, relationships. Eventually, Emma said, "Dad always felt guilty about how things went down. He thought you hated him." I told her the truth. I didn't hate him. I just couldn't be around him anymore back then. She nodded, and I could see in her face that she understood. That dinner didn't magically fix everything. We don't talk every day, and I don't think we ever will. But it opened a small door that had been closed for too long, every few months. Emma sends me a message or a photo of her kids, I reply. It's not the kind of closeness people imagine when they think of family, but it's something. As for me, life has taken a quieter turn. Aaron and I bought a small house about an hour outside the city. It's surrounded by trees, and the first time I stepped out onto the porch in the morning and heard nothing but birds, I realized I finally had the peace Mom wanted me to have. The inheritance helped make it happen. Yes, but the real value was in what it allowed me to build. A life that isn't controlled by guilt or chaos or resentment. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in the garden, I'll think about Mom and then about Frank, two people who, for all their flaws, shaped the person I became. I keep the letter from Frank in a frame on my bookshelf now. Not because I want to glorify him, but because it reminds me that people can change, even if it's too late to show it in person. The other day, I went back to visit Mom's grave for the first time in months. I told her about everything. Frank's letter, dinner with Emma, the new house. I told her I hoped she was proud of me for keeping her wishes, and for finally letting go of the anger that used to follow me everywhere. And as the wind moved through the trees around me, I could almost hear her laugh again. Soft, warm, familiar, like she was telling me that everything turned out the way it was supposed to. I think for the first time since she passed, I actually believe that story's number 4. When I realized my daughter was growing up faster than I was ready for, I never thought I'd be one of those parents who struggled with teenage boundaries. But here we are. I'm a 41-year-old dad with a 14-year-old daughter named Emily, and lately, I feel like every day she's becoming more of her own person, and I'm struggling to catch up. The skirt thing might sound small to some people, but it honestly turned into one of those moments that made me question how to balance being protective without being controlling. So, here's what happened. Emily started high school this year. It's a public school in the suburbs of Colorado. A pretty laid-back place overall, but it's still got a dress code. Skirts should be fingertip length or longer. Nothing extreme, just basic decency stuff. Last month I dropped her off for school one morning, and when she got out of the car, I noticed her skirt looked shorter than usual. Not crazy short, but definitely shorter than the one we bought at the start of the semester. I didn't say anything at first because I thought maybe it just looked that way when she was sitting down, but when I picked her up later, she was standing with her friends outside the school, laughing, backpack slung low, and I realized it was shorter, a lot shorter. When she got in the car, I tried to keep my tone light and just said, "Hey Em, is that the same skirt we bought?" She gave me that teenager look, half eye roll, half smile. "Yeah, Dad, why?" I said, "It looks shorter." She said, "I rolled it, everyone does. It looks better." And that was the moment where my brain short-circuited between wanting to parent and wanting not to embarrass her. Because she's at that age where every word feels like an attack. Especially coming from a parent, I said something like, the dress code says fingertip length for a reason. And she immediately sighed. "Dad, it's not like I'm showing anything. Everyone wears theirs like this." I didn't want to turn it into a fight, but I also didn't want to just let it slide, so I told her we'd talk when we got home. She groaned. Of course. At home. I sat down with her and tried to explain my side. I get that you want to dress how you like, but I just don't want teachers or other people judging you for it." And she fired back with, "So it's my fault if other people are inappropriate?" That one hit me, because she's right. She shouldn't be blamed for other people's behavior. But at the same time, I wanted her to understand that I'm not trying to shame her. I'm trying to protect her. It got tense. She accused me of being old-fashioned. I said, "Maybe I am, but I'm still your dad, and part of my job is looking out for you." She left the room after that, slammed her door, and didn't talk to me for most of the night. Later, my wife Lisa told me I might have come on too strong. "She's testing limits, not rebelling," she said. "Maybe try asking her why she wants to wear it that way instead of just telling her not to." So the next day, I did. We were in the kitchen before school, and I told her, "Hey, I didn't mean to make you feel bad yesterday. I just want to understand." She paused, clearly surprised I wasn't lecturing her. Then she said quietly, "It's just, everyone wears theirs shorter. I don't want to look weird." And that's when it hit me. She wasn't trying to be provocative or disrespectful. She just wanted to fit in, I told her. "You don't look weird, Em. You don't have to change to match other people." But she shrugged. Like she didn't believe me. We compromised that morning. She unrolled it a bit before leaving. But I could tell it wasn't about the skirt anymore. It was about independence, identity, and all those messy teenage things that no one really prepares you for. The real kicker came a week later when I was waiting in the car line again. Emily came out with her friends, laughing as usual, and I noticed something different. She'd unrolled the skirt completely. It was back to normal length. When she got in the car, I didn't say anything, but she noticed me glancing at her outfit. She smirked and said, "Before you ask, I didn't roll it today." I asked why, half joking, and she said, "Because Mrs. Whitman sent 2 girls to the office for dress code violations." I didn't want to deal with it. We both laughed. It was a small thing, but it felt like a truce. Later that night, I overheard her on FaceTime with her best friend, talking about how parents just don't get it, and how it's not about being inappropriate. And I realized she wasn't wrong. I don't fully get it. I grew up in the 90s, when we dressed for comfort and rebellion meant baggy jeans, not short skirts. I think I'm starting to understand that my job isn't to fight every small battle, but to make sure she knows why I care. I can't stop her from growing up, from experimenting with her style, from becoming her own person. I just have to hope that the values we've tried to raise her with stick when it really matters. The skirt's still in rotation. Sometimes it's rolled, sometimes it's not. I've learned to pick my moments now, but sometimes I'll catch her walking through the house, hair tied up, earbuds in, humming to herself, and I'll think, God, she's growing up fast. I used to be her hero. Now I'm just the guy trying not to embarrass her in front of her friends. It's hard, but it's also kind of beautiful in a way. Watching your kids slowly become their own person, even if it means letting go of the control you didn't realize you were clinging to. So, how do you tell your daughter her skirt is too short? You don't start with the skirt, you start with trust. It's been about 4 months since that first post, and I can safely say parenting a teenager is equal parts learning, unlearning, and praying you don't screw it all up. I wanted to update because things with Emily have shifted in ways I didn't expect. Not just about the skirt, but about how we talk to each other now. I didn't realize how much that one small argument opened the door to a bigger conversation about trust, respect, and the weird, fragile balance of parenting a 14-year-old girl in 2025. After that night when we found our truce, things were calm for a while. Emily was back to wearing her skirt at the normal length. And honestly, I thought maybe that little phase had passed. But about a month later, she came downstairs one morning wearing it rolled again. And this time, it was even shorter, I'll admit. My knee-jerk reaction almost ruined everything we'd built since the first fight. I started to say, "We've talked about this," but I caught myself mid-sentence. She froze, waiting for the lecture. I took a breath and said instead, "You look nice. Is there a reason you decided to roll it again today?" She looked surprised, maybe even suspicious. "There's a pep rally today," she said. "We're all supposed to wear our spirit outfits." Apparently, her grade had some color-themed day, and she and her friends wanted to look coordinated. I nodded, told her to have fun and let her go. That might sound minor, but it felt like a turning point. Me choosing to trust instead of control, and that single choice changed everything between us. That night, she came home talking nonstop about the pep rally, her friends, the teachers dancing, the chaos. And for the first time in a while, she talked to me, not at me. I realized she was opening up because I didn't make her feel judged earlier. That was a big lesson, but parenting always finds a way to humble you again. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the school. It wasn't about Emily specifically. It was a general notice about students failing to adhere to the dress code. I felt that familiar panic creep in, wondering if she'd gotten in trouble and the email was just a prelude. When she got home, I asked if anything had happened. She sighed and said, "Some girls got called out for their skirts being too short. Everyone's freaking out because the assistant principal said they're going to start calling parents if it keeps happening." Then she looked at me and said, "You're not mad, right?" That broke my heart a little. The fact that her first instinct was to assume I'd be upset. I told her, "No, I'm not mad. I just want you to feel comfortable and confident without worrying about getting in trouble or having people judge you." She nodded but didn't say much after that. A few days later, Lisa told me she'd overheard Emily talking to her best friend, Sophie, on FaceTime. Emily apparently said, "My dad used to be so strict about what I wore, but now he's chill. I think he's trying." It made me laugh. Because yeah, I am trying. Probably harder than she realizes. Around that same time, we had a dad-daughter day. Lisa was working, so it was just the two of us. I let her pick what we did, and she chose a thrift store run and lunch at a little taco place downtown. While we were going through clothes at the thrift shop, she picked out this plaid skirt. Again, short, and I braced myself for another mental lecture, but she held it up and said, "This one's probably too short for school, huh?" And I said, "Maybe for school, but you can wear it anywhere else." She smiled. Cool. That small exchange told me she's starting to understand boundaries on her own, without me having to hammer them into her. It's like she's learning to self-regulate. And I think part of that came from me loosening my grip. The truth is, this whole thing was never about the skirt. It was about control, or my fear of losing it. Watching your kid grow up is terrifying. You spend their whole childhood keeping them safe. And then one day, you realize you can't protect them from the world anymore. You just have to prepare them for it. I've also noticed how society talks to teenage girls. How quick people are to comment on what they wear or how they present themselves. I think back to my reaction that first day and realize I was projecting my fears onto her instead of listening. Last weekend, Emily had a school dance. She came out in a new dress she'd bought with her mom. It was short, sure, but not inappropriate. She looked beautiful, grown up, confident, and happy. When she asked, "Do I look okay?" I told her, "You look great. Just be safe and have fun." And she smiled, genuine and big, and said, "Thanks, Dad. Really, I don't think I've ever been prouder. Not because of the dress, but because we finally found a rhythm where she knows I trust her. And she trusts that I'm not the enemy. She still tests limits because that's what teenagers do. But now, when she pushes, I try to push back with curiosity. Not control, it's not easy. Some days I bite my tongue so hard I think I'll draw blood. But it's worth it when she walks through the door and says, 'Hey Dad, guess what?' Instead of hiding her life from me, it's wild watching your child transform into someone you'd actually want to hang out with. She's smart, funny, and more self-aware than I ever was at 14. And I'm learning that being her dad means evolving right alongside her. So yeah, the skirt still comes up sometimes, literally and figuratively. But now, it's less of a battle and more of a conversation. And I think that's all you can really hope for. If you'd told me a year ago that a too-short skirt would be what taught me how to actually listen to my daughter, I'd have laughed. But here we are, turns out. Growing up isn't just for kids. It's been almost a year now since the skirt incident. And looking back, it feels like that one argument was the beginning of a much deeper transformation. Not just for Emily, but for me too. When I first wrote about it, I was this anxious dad who didn't know how to handle watching his little girl grow up. I was caught between wanting to protect her and realizing that, sooner or later, I'd have to let her make her own choices. I thought it was about a skirt, but it turned out to be about control, identity, and trust, all wrapped into one messy, emotional chapter of fatherhood. So, here's where we are now. Emily's 15, a high school freshman. The kind of kid who has playlists for every mood, a rotating friend group, and a constant stream of sarcastic one-liners that somehow make me laugh even when I'm supposed to be the serious parent. She's confident, outspoken, and I can't believe I'm saying this, so much more emotionally mature than I was at that age. We've had our ups and downs, of course. Teenagers are basically walking contradictions. There are mornings she hugs me before school, and others where she barely grunts. Bye. There are weekends when she's all laughter and stories, and others when she holes up in her room, headphones in, living in her own little world. But the biggest change is this. I'm no longer walking on eggshells around her. We actually talk, not just about school or chores, but real things. Friendships, insecurities, what she wants out of life. And sometimes, yeah, she still pushes boundaries. Like the time she asked if she could go to a bonfire party at one of her guy friends' houses. I swear my heart started sprinting before my brain caught up. The old me would have immediately said no, listed every possible danger, and probably grounded her for even asking. But instead I told her, "I trust you. Just keep your location on and text me when you get there." She did. And later that night, she texted, "Thanks for trusting me. It means a lot." That one message nearly made me cry. Lisa and I have also gotten better at presenting a united front. In the beginning, we used to disagree about everything. She thought I was too controlling. I thought she was too lenient. Now we actually sit down and talk through our parenting approaches before reacting. She's helped me see that sometimes letting go isn't the same as giving up. But the truth is, I think I've learned the most from watching Emily handle herself. A few months ago, she came home upset because some girls at school had been making snide comments about her outfits. The irony, right? She said one girl told her she was trying too hard and called her basic. I expected her to cry, but she surprised me. She said, "Dad, I don't care what they think. I like what I wear." That moment hit me like a ton of bricks. The same kid I used to lecture about modesty was now standing in front of me, fully grounded in her own identity. Confident, self-assured, and unshaken by judgment. And I realized, she doesn't need me to protect her anymore. She just needs me to believe in her. A few weeks ago, we were driving home from a family dinner, and out of nowhere she said, "You know, you used to scare me a little, like, not in a mean way, but I was always nervous to tell you things." I asked her what changed. She said, "You started listening, that's all. You just started listening instead of freaking out." That hit me right in the chest. Because that's all she ever needed. Not a guard dog, not a dictator, just a dad who listened. And maybe that's the part of parenting no one really talks about. That it's as much about unlearning as it is about teaching. You spend years guiding your kid, but then you reach this point where they start teaching you how to be a better person. 2, I still catch myself worrying. Every time she leaves the house, every time I see something on the news about teenagers, I feel that same protective knot tighten in my chest. But I'm learning to channel that energy into support instead of control. Last month, she had her first real heartbreak. Some boy she liked decided to take a break, whatever that means. She came home and cried for hours. I wanted to call the kid's parents and give them a piece of my mind, but instead, I just sat with her. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't give advice. I just sat there, holding her hand, while she cried into my sweatshirt. Later that night, she whispered, "Thanks, Dad. For not saying anything, I just needed someone to sit with me." And that's when I knew. She's going to be just fine. She's growing up, and it's bittersweet. She's taller now. She borrows Lisa's clothes. She started talking about college, and she's got opinions about everything from feminism to climate change. Sometimes I look at her and see this young woman who's forming her own worldview. And other times, I see the little girl who used to sit on my shoulders at the zoo. But through it all, I've learned that parenting isn't about molding your kid into who you think they should be. It's about helping them become who they already are. Safely, confidently, and freely. So yeah, if you're a parent reading this, worried about your kid's short skirt or loud music or dyed hair, take it from me, pick your battles carefully, because someday, that same kid you're fighting with might just grow into the person who teaches you what unconditional love and respect really mean. And honestly, I wouldn't trade this messy, beautiful, heart-wrenching ride for anything. Emily's still got that plaid skirt from the thrift store hanging in her closet. Every now and then, I see her wearing it to go out with her friends, paired with her favorite hoodie and those beat-up sneakers she refuses to throw away. And every time I just smile, because now, I don't see a too-short skirt. I see a strong, confident young woman who's finding her way in the world. And a dad who finally learned how to let her. Stories number 5. She demanded I knit her a free blanket. Now I can't knit at work anymore. I work in an office that's fairly relaxed. Think open cubicles, shared break room, casual Fridays, and an unspoken rule that as long as you get your work done, no one really cares what you do during your breaks. I've been there for 5 years, and honestly, it's one of the few things keeping me sane. One of my little joys during downtime has always been knitting. I don't do it while I'm supposed to be working, but during lunch breaks, before meetings, or when I'm eating at my desk. It's soothing, it helps my anxiety, and over the years I've made a ton of scarves, hats, and little plushies. I even knitted a tiny cardigan for my coworker's baby shower last year, which everyone loved. Anyway, about 4 months ago, a new woman started in our department. Her name's Tessa. She's around my age. I'm 31, she's maybe 29. Loud, chatty, and the kind of person who loves being at the center of every conversation. When she first joined, she was friendly enough, and I tried to make her feel welcome. We'd chat at the coffee machine or during lunch. The first time she saw me knitting, she was fascinated. She kept asking questions about it, how long it takes, how I learned, how much yarn costs. I explained that it depends on the project, and she seemed genuinely curious. She even said, "That's such a cute hobby. You could probably sell those." I laughed and told her I sometimes do, mostly through Etsy. But mostly I knit for myself or for gifts. A few days later, she came over to my desk holding her phone. "Hey, can you make me one of these?" she asked, showing me a picture of a chunky knit blanket that looked like something straight off a Pinterest board. I told her those are pretty labor-intensive and can cost a lot, like a couple $100 if someone commissions it. She blinked. "Wait, people charge that much?" I smiled awkwardly and said, "Yeah, the yarn alone can be over $100. Depending on the size and quality." She frowned and said, "Oh, I thought you could just make it since you already have yarn." I explained that the yarn I have is mostly for smaller projects, and that I don't have the materials or time to make something that big for free. She kind of laughed like she thought I was joking and said, "Come on, it's just a blanket. You do this for fun anyway, right?" I told her gently that even if I enjoy it, it still takes a lot of effort, and that when I take commissions, I treat it like real work. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "Okay, Miss Entrepreneur." I brushed it off, but the next week, I noticed she'd started making comments every time she saw me knitting. Stuff like, "Guess you only make things for special people," or "Must be nice having time to waste on yarn." Then, one afternoon, she walked over to my desk while I was knitting during lunch and said, loud enough for others to hear, "You know, some of us actually have real hobbies." A few people glanced up, and I just froze. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "Knitting's like what grandmas do, no offense." It was awkward. I laughed it off, but my stomach dropped. After that, I started feeling self-conscious about knitting in the break room, so I stopped. I just kept it in my bag. Fast forward a couple weeks. Tessa's birthday came around. People in the office pitched in for a small gift. and I signed the card like everyone else. The next day, she came by my desk again and said, "You didn't knit me anything?" With this fake sweet tone, I said, "No, I didn't know you wanted something." She replied, "Well, you knit stuff for everyone else. I guess I'm not special enough." At that point, I was over it. I told her calmly that I don't knit for people who guilt me into it. She smirked and said, "Wow, touchy." Later that afternoon, my manager called me into her office. Apparently, Tessa had gone to her saying I was disruptive, and that my knitting made her uncomfortable. She claimed it was unprofessional and distracting. My manager didn't seem mad, just awkward, she said. "Look, I don't think you're doing anything wrong, but maybe it's best not to knit in shared spaces for now." I felt humiliated. I wasn't breaking any rule, I wasn't doing it during meetings, and no one else had ever complained in 5 years. But I didn't want to make a bigger issue of it, so I just nodded and said okay. That night, I went home and cried a little. It felt so petty, but knitting was my thing. It helped me stay calm in a stressful environment. And suddenly, it felt like I couldn't do that because one insecure person decided to make it about her. The kicker? A week later, she walked in wearing a chunky knit blanket scarf. When someone complimented it, she said, "Thanks. I found this cute lady on Etsy." I told her I'd have made one myself if I had the time. I wanted to scream. Now, I just keep my knitting in my bag and work on it in my car during breaks. My other coworkers noticed, and even told me they miss seeing my projects. A few of them hinted that they think Tessa's the reason I stopped, but I didn't confirm it. The irony is, she's now the one trying to act friendly again. Probably because people have picked up on her attitude, but I just keep things polite and distant. It's amazing how one person's entitlement can ruin something harmless. I still love knitting, but every time I pull out my needles at home, I can't help but feel a tiny sting of resentment for how she made me feel about it. Maybe it's silly to care that much, but for me, it was never just a hobby, it was a comfort. And somehow, she managed to turn that into a problem. It's been about 3 months since the whole no knitting at work thing blew up. And it's weird how something that small managed to change the whole atmosphere around the office. I didn't realize how much that little routine meant to me until it was gone. I used to look forward to my lunch breaks, grab my food, put on a podcast, and knit quietly while my brain reset from all the spreadsheets and calls. Now, even though technically I can still eat and chill, it doesn't feel relaxing anymore. After I stopped knitting at work, people started asking questions. At first, it was subtle. "Hey, what are you working on these days?" Or, "Haven't seen your projects lately." Eventually, it got around that someone had complained. One of my coworkers, Jamie, who I'm friendly with, flat out asked me, "Was it Tessa?" I didn't confirm it, but I think my silence said enough. Jamie sighed and said, "Of course it was. She's been talking trash about you to accounting." Apparently, Tessa had been telling people that I acted like I was better than everyone, because I turned a hobby into a side hustle. She was spinning it like I'd bragged about selling on Etsy, even though I'd literally mentioned it once because she asked. For a while I tried to just stay quiet and focus on work, but one day, something happened that kind of forced me to speak up. We were having an informal Friday meeting in the conference room, just a team catch-up before the weekend. Tessa showed up late, all loud and giggly like she usually does, holding a giant iced coffee. When she sat down, she pulled out a crochet hook. I swear, I thought I was hallucinating. She started crocheting during the meeting. My manager looked surprised but didn't say anything. I tried not to react, but I must have made a face, because Tessa noticed and said, "What? It's just a little something I picked up. Figured if some people can craft at work, so can I." The tension in the room was thick. A couple of my coworkers exchanged looks. I didn't say a word. I just wrote notes and stared at the agenda like it was the most interesting thing in the world. After the meeting, my manager pulled me aside. She looked uncomfortable. "Hey, I think we might need to revisit that crafting rule," she said. "It's kind of becoming a thing." I told her I hadn't said anything and that I was fine not knitting. She nodded, then added quietly, "Yeah, I know. You were never the problem." That night I went home completely drained. I couldn't believe how petty the whole situation had become. But the funny thing is, the next week, karma kind of handled it for me. Tessa brought her crochet project to the break room and left a giant pile of yarn on one of the tables. When she went to refill her coffee, someone accidentally spilled creamer all over it. She made a scene about it, loudly accusing people of not being careful and saying, "This is why I don't trust people around my stuff." It was like watching a bad sitcom. People started avoiding her after that. The same folks who used to laugh at her jokes were suddenly too busy to chat. Word travels fast in an office, and once people realized she'd been behind the knitting ban, sympathy shifted my way. The HR manager even came to me a few days later and said, "Hey, I heard there's been some tension about personal hobbies in the break room. Would you be open to a compromise?" She explained that as long as it was during break times and didn't interfere with work, there was no reason I shouldn't be allowed to knit. She said she'd be rephrasing the professional conduct guidelines to make it clearer. I almost hugged her. I went home that night, pulled out my favorite yarn, a soft plum-colored wool, and packed it in my work tote for the next day. When I sat down in the break room at lunch and started knitting again, it felt weird at first, people noticed. A few even came over and smiled. Jamie said, "Glad to see you back." Tessa walked in about halfway through lunch, saw me and froze. She didn't say anything, just grabbed her salad and left. That was 2 weeks ago, and she hasn't said a word to me since. She stopped bringing her crochet stuff too. I guess the novelty wore off when she realized she couldn't weaponize it anymore. Now things have gone mostly back to normal. I knit during breaks, sometimes chat with coworkers who are genuinely interested and ignore any background drama. I even started teaching Jamie a few basic stitches during lunch last week. We joked about starting a knitting club for the petty and tired. But the best part? A few days ago my manager walked by and said, "That looks relaxing. Maybe I should learn." And she wasn't being sarcastic. She actually sounded curious. I think this whole experience taught me a weird but valuable lesson about boundaries and pettiness in the workplace. Some people can't stand seeing others enjoy something that isn't about them. But if you quietly hold your ground long enough, the truth tends to reveal itself. So yeah, I'm knitting again. I refuse to let someone else's insecurity ruin the one thing that's always brought me peace. And every time I finish a new project, I think about how something as simple as 2 needles and some yarn managed to outlast all that unnecessary drama. Final update. It's been almost 8 months since the knitting at work debacle started, and I never thought something that small would ripple through my life this much. Honestly, it became a weird chapter of personal growth for me, like an unexpected social experiment about how petty adults can be, and how quiet persistence can shift an entire environment. After my last post, things settled into a comfortable rhythm. I knitted on my breaks again, people accepted it, and Tessa kept her distance. But life has a way of adding new layers to old drama. A few months back, we got a new employee named Erin, fresh out of college, bright and super eager to impress everyone. She was sweet, a little awkward, and wanted to befriend everyone. Naturally, Tessa latched on to her. I think she missed having an audience. At first, Erin and I got along fine. She complimented one of my scarves and even asked about learning to knit, which made me happy. I brought her some cheap practice needles and extra yarn one day. We started having little lunchtime knitting sessions, laughing about dropped stitches and tangled yarn. But it didn't take long for Tessa to poison the well again. I started noticing a shift in Erin. She got quieter, distant, and eventually stopped sitting with me at lunch. I figured maybe she just found another group to hang with. No big deal. Then one afternoon, I overheard something that made my blood boil. Tessa was in the break room with Erin and another coworker, Mark, and I caught her saying, "Yeah, she only knits for attention. It's her whole personality now, like, congrats. You can make a hat." Erin laughed nervously. Mark didn't say anything, but the silence told me he didn't want to get involved. I didn't confront Tessa. It wasn't worth it. But it did sting. I felt stupid for thinking things had changed. A few days later, Karma decided to make another appearance. Our company was hosting a small internal fair for staff hobbies and small businesses. Sort of like a creative showcase meant to promote work-life balance. HR asked if anyone wanted to set up a table, and several people signed up. Photographers, bakers, even someone who made soap. Jamie practically begged me to sign up too. I hesitated at first, not wanting to deal with any extra drama, but she convinced me, saying, "You love it. You deserve to show it off." So I did. I spent 2 weeks preparing, knitting small things, coasters, scarves, little stuffed animals. I even made a couple of office-themed items, like coffee cup cozies with funny quotes embroidered on them, fueled by caffeine and deadlines, etc. When the day came, I set up my booth, a little nervous but excited. I didn't expect much attention, just hoped a few people would stop by, but it turned into a hit. People were fascinated, asking questions, complimenting the craftsmanship. One of the VPs even bought a scarf for his wife and asked if I took commissions and who should walk in mid-event. Tessa, her face was priceless. caught between fake politeness and visible irritation. She did a little circuit around the room, then came by my table. "Oh, wow," she said, forcing a smile. "So this is what you do?" I smiled right back. "Yep, been doing it for years." She nodded, clearly trying to play it cool. "That's nice. Looks like people like it." "They do," I said simply. A week later, HR posted some photos of the event on the company's internal site, and one of mine, me smiling behind my table, got featured in the highlight email. The caption read, "Employees bring creativity to life, handmade crafts, art, and more." The compliments poured in from coworkers and even upper management. It was nice, wholesome, for the first time in months. I didn't feel like the knitting weirdo, but of course, Tessa couldn't leave it alone. She started making passive-aggressive jokes in meetings again, saying things like, "Guess I should bring my glue gun to work and call it a business too." This time, though nobody laughed, the room would go quiet, and she'd awkwardly clear her throat and move on. I think people finally saw her for what she was, a jealous, bitter person who couldn't stand not being the center of attention. About a month after that, she transferred departments officially. It was a career growth opportunity. But rumor had it her new manager requested her specifically after seeing her team conflict pattern noted in a performance review. Translation: she'd annoyed enough people that HR nudged her elsewhere. Erin actually came to apologize to me not long after. She said, "I shouldn't have believed what she said. I thought she was just being funny at first. But I get now that she was mean." I told her it was fine. I wasn't mad anymore. I was just glad she saw through it now, months later. I've got 3 co-workers who knit with me during lunch. We call ourselves the Stitch Squad. We even donate baby hats to a local hospital once a month. HR loved the idea so much that they featured us in the company newsletter again. And me? I realized something important. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't mean loud confrontation. Sometimes it just means quietly continuing to be who you are until the noise fades and your actions speak louder than their bitterness. So yeah, I knit at work, I knit at home, I knit in the park. It's not just a hobby, it's a form of peace. Something that grounds me when the world feels chaotic. The irony is, the thing Tessa mocked me for ended up being what brought people together and changed the whole energy of the office. I haven't heard from her in months, and honestly, I don't miss her. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's thriving so effortlessly that the people who tried to bring you down have to watch you shine from the sidelines. Stories number 6. He went to a strip club and cheated the night before our wedding. When people talk about betrayal, they usually make it sound sharp and dramatic, like one clean cut that splits your world in two. For me, it wasn't like that. It was slower, duller. It felt like watching someone take a hammer to the foundation of my life. One crack at a time. We were supposed to get married in 3 days. I just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital, came home exhausted, and found his tux hanging in the closet next to my wedding dress. I remember smiling at it, like it was some movie moment. Like this was what happiness looked like. I didn't know that while I was scrubbing blood off my shoes in the nurse's locker room, he was sitting in a booth at a strip club, ordering champagne and making the worst mistake of his life. His name was Derek. We'd been together for 6 years, engaged for 1. And in that time, I thought we'd built something unshakable. He was charming, good with my friends, the kind of man who always remembered my coffee order and rubbed my back when I fell asleep studying for exams. I'd seen him lose his job once and build himself back up from nothing. I trusted him more than I trusted anyone else in the world. That Friday night, he had his bachelor party. I didn't mind. I actually helped plan it a little. His best man, Ryan, promised me they'd keep it classy. A few bars, some drinks, nothing crazy. "We're too old for dumb stuff," Ryan said, laughing. Derek kissed my forehead and told me he'd be home by midnight. He wasn't. I woke up at 3:27 a.m., to an empty bed and a weird feeling in my stomach. I called him. No answer. I texted Ryan. No reply. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he was sleeping at Ryan's. I was anxious. But I didn't want to be the paranoid fiancé who couldn't let her man have fun. He stumbled in around 9:00 a.m., reeking of booze and cheap perfume. His hair was a mess, his shirt half-buttoned. I asked what happened, and he said they went a little wild. I tried to laugh it off until I saw the lipstick on his collar. Not smudged, not faded, fresh. He saw me looking at it and froze. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. He said it was a prank. One of the girls at the club did it for a picture. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something in his eyes looked wrong, like guilt was sitting heavy behind them. I went to take a shower to calm down. But when I came out, his phone lit up with a text. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but I did. It said, "Last night was amazing. You sure you're still going through with the wedding?" I felt my stomach drop so hard I thought I might throw up. I opened the thread. It was a number with no name, but the messages told me everything. Flirty texts from the night before, pictures, and one that said, "You're so hot for a groom." I just stood there shaking. My hands were cold, my ears were ringing, and when Derek came back into the room, I held up his phone and said, "Who is she?" He tried to grab it from me. I didn't let him. At first, he lied. Said it was someone joking around. But when I scrolled down to a photo of them in the VIP section, her sitting on his lap, both of them grinning like idiots, he broke. He sat down on the bed and started crying. "I was drunk, Leah," he said. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just one mistake." I think I laughed. An ugly, broken kind of laugh. "One mistake?" I said. "You cheated on me the week of our wedding, Derek. What part of that do you think is a mistake?" He begged me to listen, to forgive him. He swore it meant nothing, that it was a stupid, drunken moment, and he'd do anything to make it right. He even said he'd cancel the wedding himself if that's what I wanted. "Just please don't walk out. I pack my bag anyway." The calls started before I even reached my sister's house. Ryan called first, apologizing, saying he'd tried to stop Derek but things got out of hand. He said Derek had been flirting all night, that he'd been egged on by the guys, that the girl had taken things too far. I asked if anyone made him cheat, and Ryan went quiet. By noon, my mom called. Derek had told his family what happened, and they were apparently worried I'd overreact. His mom said, "Sweetheart, he's a good man. Don't throw everything away over one night of bad judgment." I hung up on her. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal. It was realizing how fast everyone wanted me to minimize it, to smooth it over and get back to the fantasy. I'd been the reliable one my whole life, the one who held things together. For once, I didn't want to fix it. The next day, I called the venue, the florist, the photographer. I told them the wedding was off. Derek showed up at my sister's door crying, saying he loved me, that he couldn't live without me. He tried to hand me my engagement ring back. Like that would erase what he did, I told him. Love doesn't look like what you did. It doesn't beg for forgiveness when it's convenient. Then I closed the door. The following weeks were brutal. I had to tell relatives, cancel plans, return gifts. Every time someone said, "I'm so sorry," I felt like I was being reminded that I'd built my future on a lie. I went through a kind of mourning, grieving not for him, but for the life I thought I was about to start. About a month later, I found out the woman he cheated with worked at the strip club where they had the party. Her name was Kelsey. He'd texted her after that night. It wasn't just a one-time thing. They'd been talking for weeks before it happened. That was when all my sympathy died. Derek texted me again in the spring, saying he was in therapy, that he missed me, that he wished he could undo everything. I didn't respond. I didn't need closure from him anymore. I'd already given it to myself. It's been almost a year now. I moved to Seattle for a new nursing position, and I'm living in a small apartment with plants, soft light, and quiet mornings. It's not the life I planned, but it's mine. Sometimes, I still think about that night, the smell of his cologne, the look on his face when he realized he'd lost me. And every time I do, I feel this mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the years I gave to someone who didn't deserve them, and relief that I walked away before tying myself to that kind of betrayal forever. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't mean ignoring your own pain. It doesn't mean staying to prove a point or forgiving someone just because they cry. Love, real love, shows up when no one's watching, and never leaves you standing alone with lipstick on someone else's collar. It's been about 8 months since I walked away from Derek, and somehow I've learned to breathe again. When everything first happened, I kept thinking the pain would last forever, that I'd always wake up with that same heavy pit in my chest. But somewhere along the way, the weight started to shift. I still remember, though, every single detail of the days that followed. After I canceled the wedding, I took 2 weeks off work. My co-workers tried to keep things light, offering wine nights or revenge spa days. But I wasn't ready to laugh about it yet. The first few days were a blur of anger and disbelief. I didn't eat much. I scrolled through old photos, trying to understand where things had started to fall apart. I kept looking for signs I'd missed. Late nights at work, New cologne, the extra time he spent on his phone. But the truth is, I'd trusted him completely. About 3 weeks after the breakup, I got an email from the venue coordinator asking if I wanted to transfer our deposit. I told her no, to keep it. It felt symbolic, like I was letting go of something bigger than money. Then, out of nowhere, Derek's sister, Heather, called. She wanted to meet for coffee. I hesitated, but I agreed. She'd always been kind to me. We met at a cafe downtown, and she looked miserable. She said she was ashamed of her brother, that she didn't condone what he did, and that her family had been pressuring her to smooth things over. I told her she didn't owe me an apology for his behavior, and we ended up talking for over 2 hours about everything except Derek. It was the first time in weeks that I felt normal. A few days later, I got another message from him. He wrote this long, dramatic email about how therapy was helping him see the root of his self-sabotage, and that he needed me to know he was changing. I didn't reply, but I saved the message. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because deleting it felt too final at the time. Around month 3, I started running again. It sounds small, but it helped. I'd get up early, tie my sneakers, and just move. There was something healing about pushing my body when my mind felt stuck. I started going to a local yoga class too, and met a woman named Nina who quickly became a friend. She never pushed me to talk about Derek, but when I finally did, she said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the person who breaks you just teaches you how to rebuild stronger. That's when I decided to go to therapy myself. I'd spent years taking care of everyone else, patients, friends, even Derek. And I finally wanted to take care of me. My therapist, Caroline, helped me unpack things I didn't realize were still sitting heavy inside me. She told me something simple but powerful. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. I didn't forgive him right away, but I started forgiving myself, for not seeing it sooner, for loving someone who betrayed me, for thinking I had to fix what I didn't break. Then came the surprise. Derek got engaged again, to Kelsey. I found out through a mutual friend who sent me a screenshot of their engagement post. There they were, smiling on a beach, with a caption that said, "A second chance at forever." I won't lie, it stung. Not because I wanted him back, but because it felt like watching someone rewrite history in real time. People commented things like, "So happy for you too," and "You deserve all the happiness." And all I could think was, does she even know what he did to me? I didn't reach out. I didn't say a word. I closed Instagram for a while and let myself feel whatever I needed to. That night I cried once, just once, and the next morning, I woke up lighter. It hit me then. I didn't need revenge or an apology or validation. I just needed distance. Months passed, and little by little, life started feeling like mine again. I redecorated my apartment, painted the walls a warm sage green, got rid of anything that reminded me of him. I even threw out my old bedding because it still smelled faintly like his cologne. It felt symbolic, cleansing one morning. While I was getting ready for work, I looked in the mirror and realized I actually liked the person staring back at me again. There was no trace of that hollow, shaky version of myself from last year. I was just Leah again. Then something unexpected happened. I met someone new. His name's Grant. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was the opposite of Derek in almost every way. Calm, honest, and just. Steady, we started slow. I told him everything about my past, and instead of flinching or pitying me, he just said, "That must have hurt a lot. I'm glad you didn't let it change who you are. We've been seeing each other for about 2 months now. I'm not rushing into anything, and he respects that. It's refreshing to be with someone who doesn't need to be the center of attention, who listens instead of talking over me." The other night, while we were having dinner, Grant said, "You know, I think people show you who they are when things fall apart." It hit me like a truth I wish I'd learned years ago. So here I am, 8 months later, living proof that you can lose almost everything you thought you wanted and still find peace. I still wear the same necklace I had on when Derek cheated on me. Not because it reminds me of him, but because it reminds me of how far I've come since that morning. Sometimes I still think about what might have happened if I'd ignored the lipstick, if I'd believed his excuses. Maybe I'd be married to a man who still went to strip clubs and thought love was something you could betray and then cry your way out of. But I didn't. I left, and that's the version of the story I get to keep. It's been almost 2 years since everything happened, and for the first time I can say it feels like another life. The pain that once felt like it lived in my skin has softened into something I can look at without breaking. When I think about Derek now, it's not with anger, it's just distant, like remembering a story that doesn't belong to me anymore. Grant and I are still together. We moved in 6 months ago, into a little townhouse on the edge of the city. It's got this tiny backyard with a maple tree that turns the most ridiculous shade of orange every fall. We planted herbs, hung fairy lights, and built a fire pit out of leftover bricks from the previous owner. It feels simple, but it's home. When I told Grant about my past, I remember holding my breath, waiting for that look. Pity, judgment, curiosity. But he didn't give me any of that. He just said, "You went through hell, and you came out standing. That's the part that matters." It's such a small thing, but it changed how I looked at myself. I stopped seeing myself as the woman who got cheated on, and started seeing myself as the woman who walked away from something that wasn't love. I still hear about Derek sometimes, not intentionally. Just through friends of friends, a few months ago, I learned that his engagement to Kelsey fell apart. Apparently he cheated again, this time with someone from her workplace. When I heard that, I didn't feel vindicated or happy. I just felt sad. Sad for her mostly. Sad that she probably believed the same apologies I once did. Heather, his sister, reached out after it all fell apart. She sent me a message saying she was proud of how I handled everything, and that she'd been thinking of me when she heard about the breakup. I told her I appreciated it, and I meant it. There's no lingering bitterness anymore, just understanding. Some people don't change because they don't want to, and that's not something you can fix for them. The hospital I work at recently promoted me to charge nurse. It's a lot more responsibility, but it's something I've worked toward for years. I'm leading my own team now, mentoring younger nurses, and it feels good to have something that's completely mine. The girl who cried in her sister's guest room surrounded by half-packed wedding boxes wouldn't have believed this version of me existed. I remember, about a year after it all went down, I found Derek's letter again, the one he sent after therapy. It had been sitting in a drawer under some old documents. I reread it once, and it just felt empty. All those words about regret, change, and redemption, but nothing that sounded like truth. I burned it in the sink that night, watched it turn to ash and swirl down the drain. It wasn't some big dramatic act, just a quiet ending to something that didn't deserve space anymore. Sometimes people ask if I've forgiven him. The answer is yes, but not in the way people expect. I don't forgive him because I think he deserves it. I forgive him because I needed to stop carrying him around in every thought, every guarded moment. Letting go of the hate didn't mean I forgot. It just meant I chose peace over punishment. Grant and I took a trip to Maine this summer. We drove up the coast, stopping at tiny coffee shops and antique stores along the way. One morning we were watching the sun rise on the beach, and he turned to me and said, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently back then?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "No," I said. "If they had, I wouldn't have found this version of my life." And I meant it, because the truth is, betrayal broke me, but it also forced me to rebuild in ways I never would have otherwise. It taught me boundaries, strength, and the power of walking away. It taught me that sometimes love looks like staying, but sometimes it looks like closing a door and never reopening it, even when it hurts. Now, when I look at the life I have, a career I'm proud of, friends who lift me up, a partner who's kind and steady, I realize that every moment of heartbreak led me here. I used to think the worst thing that ever happened to me was losing Derek. Now I know the worst thing would have been staying. So if you're where I was, staring at a cracked foundation, wondering how you'll ever feel whole again, I promise you will. It won't happen overnight, it won't be easy. But one morning, you'll wake up, make your coffee, step into the sunlight, and realize the storm finally passed. And when you do, you won't just feel better. You'll feel free. Stories number 7. Should I tell my boyfriend my deepest secret? I've been with Tyler for a little over a year now, and he's the first person I've ever really let in. Not the casual kind of letting in, like telling someone your favorite movie or your dream vacation, but the kind where they start to see the real, unfiltered version of you, the parts you've kept hidden from everyone else. Tyler is good. That's the word that keeps coming to mind when I think of him. He's patient in a way that feels rare, gentle without being weak, and somehow knows exactly when to crack a joke and when to just hold me. He's the kind of person who makes you want to be honest. And that's what scares me, because there's something I've never told anyone. Not my friends, not my therapist from years ago, not even my own mother. It's a part of me that I've shoved so deep down that sometimes I can almost pretend it doesn't exist. I was 17 when it happened. There was a night, a party, and a decision I made that changed the trajectory of my life. I got into a car with someone I trusted, an older guy I'd been seeing secretly. He was 21, charming, reckless. That night we crashed. He was drunk, I wasn't. He walked away with a broken arm. I walked away fine physically. But the girl in the back seat, my friend Lauren, didn't make it. It wasn't technically my fault. The police said that. He was the one driving. But I was the one who convinced her to come out that night. The one who promised we'd be safe. Her parents never looked at me the same again. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. After that, I changed schools, went quiet, buried myself in college, therapy, and eventually work. I rebuilt brick by brick. I made sure no one saw the cracks underneath. And now, all these years later, I've built a life that's steady, peaceful, maybe even happy. But Tyler's the kind of person who notices things. He picks up on the way I flinch when someone mentions car accidents. He sees how I change the subject when old high school friends pop up on social media. And lately he's been asking gentle questions, not prying, just wondering. The thing is, I can feel how much he loves me, and I love him too. But every time he looks at me like I'm this pure, kind-hearted person, I feel sick because he doesn't know. He doesn't know about the night that ended someone's life, about the guilt that's woven into everything I am. We've talked about marriage, hypothetically. He said things like, when we have kids someday, and I smile. But inside, I freeze. Because how can I build a future with someone when he doesn't even know who he's really with? I've imagined telling him 100 different ways. Sometimes I picture sitting him down over dinner, taking his hand and telling him everything. Sometimes I imagine blurting it out in the car, my voice cracking while the radio plays something too cheerful. But every time, the outcome in my head is the same. He looks at me differently. What if he sees me as a murderer? Even if the law says I wasn't responsible, even if years have passed, I still feel like I was. What if this ruins everything good that's finally come into my life? And yet keeping it in feels unbearable too. It's like there's a glass wall between us, invisible, but always there. He tells me everything about his past, his mistakes, his heartbreaks, his family issues. And I sit there nodding, pretending like I'm doing the same. But I'm not. I'm hiding something massive. I've tried convincing myself it's not necessary, that what's done is done, and dragging it back up would just cause pain. But I can't shake the feeling that it's dishonest, that every kiss, every "I love you," is tainted by the secret I'm keeping. Last weekend, he surprised me with a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains. It was quiet, cozy, and perfect. Too perfect. The kind of weekend that makes you start imagining the rest of your life. The night before we left, we sat on the porch watching the fire die down. And he said, "You know, I feel like I can tell you anything. Like I've never had that with anyone before." I smiled, but my stomach twisted into knots, because that's exactly how I feel. And yet I can't. When we got home, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Lauren's face, about the sound of her laughter that night, about how if I'd just stayed home, she'd still be alive. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself. So now I'm sitting here typing this, wondering what the right thing is. Should I tell him? Should I risk everything we've built just to unburden myself? Or should I keep living with it? Quietly, painfully, but safely? He once told me that honesty is the foundation of love. That secrets rot relationships from the inside out. But what if my honesty destroys his trust in me completely? I love him, I really do. But I also love the version of me he sees. The one who's strong, kind, put together. The version that isn't haunted by a single, irreversible night. Maybe it's selfish, but I don't know if I'm ready to watch that version of me die in his eyes. Update. It's been almost 3 months since I wrote that post, and I finally told Tyler. I didn't plan to, not exactly. It just happened, and it didn't go the way I expected. After I posted, I read every comment that said things like, "If you love him, tell him, and secrets eat you alive." Some people told me to protect myself, that what happened wasn't my fault. Others said I owed him the truth no matter the risk. I kept going back and forth in my head until it started to consume me. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep without dreaming about that night, couldn't even look Tyler in the eye without feeling like a fraud. One Saturday, we went hiking, something we've done together since we started dating. He loves trails, loves the peace of the woods. We packed snacks, water, and drove out to a quiet spot about an hour from town. It was one of those crisp fall days when the air feels sharp and clean. Everything was orange and gold, and it should have been beautiful, but I felt sick the entire drive there. He noticed, of course. He always does. Halfway through the hike, he asked, "You okay?" "You've been quiet all morning." I said I was fine. But he didn't buy it. We stopped at this overlook, where you can see the whole valley below. He wrapped his arm around me and said softly, "Whatever it is, you can tell me." And that was it. I just broke. I started crying. The kind of crying that comes out of nowhere and feels uncontrollable. He looked startled at first, then scared. He pulled me close, asking what was wrong, and all I could say was, "I need to tell you something, and you might not look at me the same afterward." We sat down on a big flat rock, and I told him everything, every detail, from the night of the party, to the car ride, to the sound of the crash, the sirens, the hospital, the funeral, the way Lauren's parents couldn't even look at me. I told him about how I stopped driving for years, how I used to have nightmares so bad I'd wake up screaming, how I replayed the moment over and over again until I almost forgot what her real laugh sounded like, how I hated myself for surviving when she didn't. By the time I finished, I was shaking. He didn't say anything for the longest time. He just stared at me, not angry, not disgusted, just quiet. Then he said, "You were 17. I nodded. Crying harder, he said it again. "You were 17. Like he was trying to remind me of something I couldn't see. I kept saying, "But it's still my fault." And he shook his head, grabbed my hand and said, "You didn't kill her. That boy did. You were a kid who trusted someone you shouldn't have. You've been punishing yourself ever since." That was the moment I lost it completely. I don't know how long I cried, long enough that the sun started to dip lower. He didn't try to stop me or fill the silence. He just stayed there, holding me, later. When we finally walked back to the car, I asked if he saw me differently now. He said, "No, but I see more of you. And that doesn't make me love you less." I thought hearing that would make me feel better instantly, but it didn't. Not right away. It felt heavy, like my secret had finally left my body. But the hole it left behind was raw. The first few days after that were awkward. He was gentle, overly so. Like he was afraid to say the wrong thing, and I was just numb. But then, slowly, things started to settle. We started talking about it. Not just the event, but what it's done to me all these years. One night he asked, "Have you ever forgiven yourself?" And I couldn't answer. I don't think I ever have since then. I've gone back to therapy. Real therapy this time. Not just the half-hearted sessions I did in college. Tyler encouraged me to. He even offered to come with me to a session. But I told him I needed to do it alone. The therapist, Dr. Myers, has been helping me untangle the guilt I've been carrying. She said something in our last session that really stuck. "You've spent more time trying to atone for something that wasn't your crime than you have learning how to live." It's strange hearing that. Part of me still doesn't believe it, but I'm trying. Tyler's been incredible through all of this. He doesn't bring it up unless I do. He doesn't pity me. Doesn't tiptoe around the topic. He just understands. The other day we were watching a movie where there was a car crash scene. And for the first time in years, I didn't look away. He didn't make a big deal about it, just squeezed my hand. That quiet understanding meant everything. I also reached out to Lauren's parents, something I never thought I'd do. I didn't know what I'd even say, but I wrote them a letter. I told them I was sorry, that I still think about her every day, that she changed my life in more ways than I can count. I didn't expect a reply, but they sent one back. Her mom wrote, "We never blamed you. We just lost too much to know how to face anyone who reminded us of her. I hope you find peace." I read that letter at least 10 times. I cried until my eyes hurt, but for the first time, the guilt didn't feel like a permanent weight, more like a shadow I could finally see behind me instead of around me. Tyler says he's proud of me, and I think deep down, I'm starting to be proud of myself too. Not because of what I survived, but because I finally stopped hiding from it. I don't know what the future looks like for us, but I do know one thing. I don't feel like I'm lying anymore. The wall between us is gone when he says he loves me now. I can finally believe it, because he's loving all of me. Even the parts I was too scared to show. Sometimes, I still wake up in the middle of the night and think about Lauren. I don't think that will ever go away. But now, instead of just guilt, there's gratitude too. Gratitude that I had her in my life, that I'm still here, and that maybe, just maybe, I'm allowed to be happy again. And that, I think, is the closest thing to forgiveness I've ever felt. It's been a full year since I told Tyler everything. It still feels strange to think about how much my life has changed since then. How much lighter I feel, and how differently I see myself. After my last update, I kept going to therapy, Every week, I'd walk into Dr. Myers's office feeling like I was peeling another layer off. Sometimes it hurt more than I expected. There were sessions where I left feeling raw, like I'd opened up wounds I thought had scarred over. But over time, something started to shift. The memories didn't disappear, but they stopped owning me. I started driving again. That might sound small, but for me, it was huge. For years, I avoided being behind the wheel unless I absolutely had to. The first time I drove alone on a highway again, I cried the entire time. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because I finally felt like I wasn't trapped anymore. I could move forward, literally and emotionally. Tyler's been there through every bit of it. He's seen me at my best and worst. There were nights I'd wake up shaking, drenched in sweat, replaying the crash in my head. He'd hold me, whispering, "You're safe. You're here." He never once made me feel broken. We've grown a lot together this past year. We even moved in together last month, something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. The first night in our new place, we sat on the floor eating takeout because our furniture hadn't arrived yet, and he said, "I hope you know this is your clean slate." I smiled, but inside I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. For so long, I thought that night defined me, that every good thing I had was borrowed, temporary, something I didn't really deserve. But I'm learning that guilt doesn't have to be a life sentence. You can carry what happened without letting it crush you. Lauren's mom actually reached out again a few months ago. She said she was glad I wrote, that my letter brought her some comfort too. We've exchanged a few emails since then, mostly about small things. Memories of Lauren, photos from when we were teenagers. It's been healing in a way I didn't expect. For both of us, I think. She told me that Lauren had always said I was the most careful person she knew. That hit me harder than anything else. I spent so long believing I was reckless, that I was the reason everything went wrong. But hearing that from her mom, that maybe Lauren didn't see me that way, helped me see that one bad night didn't erase who I was. Tyler knows when I get quiet now. He can read it instantly. He doesn't push, doesn't try to fix it. He just lets me be, and somehow, that's exactly what I need. A few weeks ago, we were driving to visit his parents, and we passed an accident on the side of the road. I tensed up. My body still remembers before my brain does. He reached over, rested his hand on mine, and said nothing. That silence meant everything. It's funny. I used to think telling him my secret would destroy everything between us. But it's done the opposite. It's deepened it. There's no pretending anymore. No careful editing of who I am. He's seen the worst part of me, the part I never thought anyone could love. And he stayed. We talk sometimes about the future, marriage, kids, all of that. The old me would have panicked at the idea. I didn't think someone like me was supposed to have that kind of happiness, but now, I think I'm starting to believe I might deserve it. I still go to therapy, though not as often. Dr. Myers says I've made remarkable progress. But she also reminds me that healing isn't linear. Some days I wake up and the guilt feels far away. Other days it hits me out of nowhere. A song, a smell, a memory. But instead of drowning in it, I've learned how to breathe through it. There's one thing she said during our last session that I keep replaying in my mind. You don't have to erase the past to build a future. You just have to stop letting it be the only story you tell yourself. That's what I'm doing now. Rewriting the story. The girl who walked away from that crash isn't just a survivor. She's someone who learned how to rebuild, to forgive, to let love in even when it terrified her. She's someone who finally understands that broken people can still create beautiful lives. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, I still talk to Lauren in my head. I tell her about my life, about Tyler, about the apartment, about how I finally started painting again. I tell her I miss her, that I wish things had been different, that I'm trying to live the kind of life she would have been proud of. And for the first time, when I say those things, I don't feel that crushing weight of guilt. I feel something softer, a quiet kind of love, a sense that maybe she forgave me long before I learned to forgive myself. I'll never forget her. I'll never stop carrying her with me. But I've stopped letting that night define who I am. And as for Tyler, he's still here. Still steady, still good. The other day he told me, "I don't love you in spite of your past. I love you because of who it made you." I think that's the first time I truly believe that maybe, just maybe, I'm not broken anymore. Stories number 8, the Great Meal Prep Illusion. Okay, I'll admit it. I started this whole thing with good intentions. When I first told my friends I was meal prepping every Sunday, it wasn't technically a lie. I genuinely planned to start meal prepping. You know, saving money, eating healthier. Being one of those people who posts colorful containers of perfectly portioned meals on Instagram, with the caption, "Meal Prep Queen." But as with most good intentions, mine got derailed the second I realized how much effort was involved. It all started last year when my two best friends, Lauren and Maya, decided they were going to get serious about adulting. They started budgeting, cooking more at home, and meal prepping together every Sunday. They'd send me pictures, rows of Tupperware filled with grilled chicken, quinoa, and veggies, looking like something straight off a lifestyle blog. Meanwhile, I was eating leftover Chinese food straight from the carton while scrolling DoorDash. The first Sunday they invited me over to join, I panicked. I told them I'd already done my prepping early that morning. "Wow, look at you," Lauren said, totally impressed. "Send pics." So I did what any self-respecting liar would do. I ordered from a local place called Harvest Table that makes those health bowl-type meals and carefully transferred the food into my own containers. Then I took photos of my meal prep on the counter, the lighting just right, and sent them in the group chat with a caption like, "Tried something new this week, spicy chickpea bowls." They ate it up, figuratively. Anyway, Maya texted, "You're killing it, girl. We should swap recipes." That's how it started. At first, it was harmless. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone long-term. I just didn't want to feel like the lazy one in the group. But then the fake meal prep routine became a thing every Sunday. I'd order a variety of healthy-ish takeout. Grain bowls, salads, chicken and rice dishes, from places that looked homemade enough to pass off as my own. I'd spend half an hour dividing them into glass containers, label them with a dry erase marker, and take a Sunday spread picture for my group chat. It became weirdly satisfying, almost like performance art. The girls would gush over how consistent I was, how good my meals looked, and how I was so disciplined. I told them that prepping had changed my life, that I never got takeout anymore, that I'd saved hundreds of dollars. Yeah, the irony was not lost on me. Then, the lie got complicated. About 2 months in, Lauren asked if I could host our meal prep Sunday one week because her kitchen was being renovated. My stomach dropped. I scrambled for an excuse, said my stove was acting up, my fridge was broken. Anything. Lauren, being the resourceful person she is, offered, "We can use your place anyway. I'll bring a portable burner and my cooler." I told her I was out of town. She bought it, but I knew that excuse wouldn't last forever. I started to dread Sundays, not because I hated what I was doing, but because I knew the lie was spiraling. I had to keep it up every week. I'd drop $60–80 on meal prep, take photos, and pretend I'd cooked everything myself. Then came the day it all blew up, one random Wednesday. Maya swung by my apartment unannounced to drop off some Tupperware she'd borrowed. I'd just finished lunch, pad thai from my favorite Thai place, and the container was sitting right on the counter. Logo and all. She glanced at it, then at my neatly stacked fridge of meal prep containers. "You still getting takeout sometimes?" she asked, smiling casually. I stammered something about treating myself midweek, but her face shifted into that curious look only a close friend can give. Half confusion, half suspicion. She walked over, opened one of my containers, and laughed. "Is this from Lotus Bowl?" "Dude, this is the same rice I get there." I froze. "What?" "No, I made that. It's jasmine rice." "Jasmine rice with the same scallion garnish and branded compostable lid you forgot to take off?" she said, grinning caught. Dead to rights, I sighed, defeated. "Okay, fine, you got me. It's takeout." Maya absolutely lost it. She was laughing so hard she had to sit down. "You mean to tell me you've been buying meal prep every week?" I tried to explain. I didn't want to seem lazy, okay? You guys are always talking about budgeting and health and meal prep, and I didn't want to look like the unmotivated one. She couldn't even be mad. She called Lauren immediately, put me on speaker, and made me confess. Lauren was so amused she could barely talk. "I knew your meals looked too good to be true. You were out here running a full-on fake meal prep operation. The jokes haven't stopped since. They call me Chef DoorDash now. They tease me every Sunday. Hey, what's on the menu this week? Uber Eats stir-fry? Grubhub lasagna?" But the thing is, the whole situation weirdly worked out. After everything came out, they admitted they'd both been slacking on their own meal prep too. Turns out Lauren had started ordering rotisserie chicken instead of cooking it. And Maya confessed she'd been buying pre-chopped veggies and pretending she'd cut them herself. So we were all kind of lying. To ourselves, if not each other, now. We do honest meal prep Sundays. Sometimes we cook, sometimes we order in. Sometimes we just hang out and portion food into containers while drinking wine. No pressure, no pretending, and I'll admit, since getting caught, I've actually started cooking a little for real. Nothing fancy. Some roasted veggies, a few pasta dishes, but enough that it's not completely fraudulent anymore. The irony? I actually kind of enjoy it now. There's something nice about cooking without the pressure of looking perfect or proving anything. So yeah, maybe I'm not the meal prep queen I pretended to be, but I learned something unexpected from this mess. It's better to laugh at yourself than to maintain a lie that doesn't matter. Though, to this day, every time Lauren texts, "Send me your meal prep pic," I can't help but roll my eyes and send back a photo captioned, "Courtesy of DoorDash." At least now, it's the truth. All right, here's the long update, and oh boy. This saga somehow managed to evolve beyond what I ever imagined. It's been about 5 months since the Chef DoorDash reveal, and what started as a dumb little white lie about takeout containers has weirdly snowballed into one of the most unexpectedly positive changes in my life. No exaggeration, it completely altered my social circle, my weekends, and even my relationship with food and honesty, but we'll get there. After the whole reveal, the teasing from my friends didn't stop. Not even a little, in fact, it intensified for a while. Every time we hung out, someone had a new joke. Lauren gifted me a DoorDash gift card for my birthday, wrapped in a bow with a card that said, "To our favorite meal prep chef." Maya once sent a picture of her actual meal prep and captioned it, "You could never." I rolled my eyes and played along, but beneath the humor, something cool started happening. They weren't mocking me anymore. It became this shared joke, a symbol of how close we'd gotten and how little we actually cared about appearances anymore. About 2 months after that, Lauren suggested that we start a Sunday swap, a new version of our old meal prep hangouts, but with zero expectations. The rule was simple. Everyone brings something, anything, whether you cooked it, bought it, or even just brought snacks. No judgment. The first Sunday swap was chaos, but in the best way. Lauren made chicken burrito bowls. Maya brought homemade granola and yogurt parfaits. I, being me, showed up with a bag of takeout sushi rolls from a local spot and sheepishly admitted, "Still can't cook rice without burning it." Instead of laughing at me, they were like, "Perfect, sushi goes great with this." And from there, it snowballed into a tradition every Sunday. We rotate houses and host a mini potluck, half homemade, half store-bought, always honest. Sometimes someone actually preps meals for the week, but most of the time it's just about hanging out, eating, and pretending we're more put-together adults than we actually are. The weirdest part? Through all of this, I started to want to learn how to cook. It wasn't out of guilt or pressure anymore. It was genuine curiosity. Lauren started teaching me the basics, how to properly use spices, how to roast vegetables without them turning into mush, how to make rice without ruining the pot. There was one night where I managed to make a full dinner for the 3 of us. Lemon garlic chicken, roasted potatoes, and a salad. I was so proud of it I almost cried when they said it tasted good. Lauren even said, "This is actually better than my meal prep chicken," Maya said. Look at you, graduating from DoorDash to domestic goddess, I won't lie. I still order takeout way too often, but it's not a cover-up anymore. I'll post my little food photos sometimes with the caption, "Didn't make it, still proud of it." It's silly, but it feels real somewhere along the way. My coworkers found out about the story too. Lauren, who also works with me, accidentally mentioned Chef DoorDash during a team lunch. I thought I'd die of embarrassment, but instead, my boss started laughing and said, "That's genius, honestly. We've all done something like that." Turns out, half the office had their own versions of my lie. One guy admitted he'd been telling his fiancée he was hitting the gym every morning when he was actually going to Starbucks to scroll Reddit in peace. Another coworker confessed she tells people she bakes her famous brownies from scratch, but they're just Ghirardelli boxed mix. It became this hilarious, oddly wholesome bonding moment, and then, the kicker. Someone in HR decided to host a funny confessions icebreaker event for our department. Lauren submitted my story, with my permission, and I had to tell the entire tale of how I'd been running a fake meal prep operation out of my kitchen for months. Everyone was crying, laughing by the end. After that, the nickname stuck, but in the best way possible. Even our manager joked about getting me a personalized apron that said, "Executive Chef, Department of DoorDash." As for me personally, I think the whole situation taught me a weirdly valuable lesson. Pretending to have it together is exhausting. And nobody actually wants perfection anyway. I spent months trying to keep up a facade that no one asked for. And when it fell apart, I realized people connected with me more when I was honest about my laziness. my insecurities, and my inability to chop an onion correctly. The Sunday swaps have become one of my favorite things in the world. Sometimes we invite more friends, like Lauren's boyfriend, Maya's sister, or even a few coworkers. One time, we ordered from 5 different takeout places and made a faux meal prep buffet. It was chaotic, delicious, and utterly imperfect, and yeah, I still keep my meal prep containers lined up in the fridge sometimes. But now they're filled with actual food I've made, or leftovers I'm not pretending about. It's not a lie anymore. It's just life, messy and mixed, kind of like my cooking. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that authenticity, even when it's clumsy or ridiculous, wins every time. You can't build friendships or self-esteem on curated lies, even small ones. But you can build them on laughter, takeout, and a willingness to admit you're just doing your best. So yeah, Chef DoorDash is retired, but honestly, I kind of miss her. She was a disaster, but she started something real. It's funny looking back now, how something as trivial as faking meal prep snowballed into one of the biggest personal transformations I've had in my adult life. It's been a little over a year since the Chef DoorDash saga began. And if you'd told me then that a bunch of takeout containers and one lie would somehow change the way I live, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. The short version? I've actually become that person now, the one who cooks. For real this time, I know. I can hardly believe it either. After the last update, the Sunday swaps with Lauren and Maya became a permanent thing. We didn't miss a week for months. It evolved naturally. From casual potluck hangouts to this comfortable little ritual that grounds all of us. Sometimes we cook together. Sometimes we order out. Sometimes we just drink wine and complain about work while pretending to meal prep. But the difference now is that I started enjoying the process of cooking. I started watching YouTube channels, reading simple recipes, and experimenting. I burnt things, so many things, but slowly got better. One night, I tried making homemade ramen from scratch. It was too salty, but it tasted like progress. Lauren said, "You're officially retired from Chef DoorDash life," Maya added. "Nah, she's executive sous chef now," we all laughed. But it kind of hit me how far things had come. Then something unexpected happened. Earlier this year, I got laid off from my old job. It was sudden, corporate restructuring, the usual story. At first, I was panicking about bills and next steps. But then Lauren half-jokingly said, "Well, at least now you've got time to start that fake meal prep business for real." I laughed. But then I started thinking, I'd gotten really good at presentation. I knew how to make meals look nice, how to portion food, how to make the most out of a few ingredients. I had people at work, back before the layoff, who used to say they wished they had time to prep meals like I did. The irony wasn't lost on me, so I did something that would have sounded absolutely ridiculous a year ago. I started a side hustle. Nothing big, just small batch meal prep for busy coworkers and friends who didn't want to cook. I called it Prepish. The name was my little inside joke, because half the time, the recipes were semi-homemade. Part fresh ingredients, part shortcuts. I posted some photos on Instagram and got a few orders right away. Then those turned into repeat customers. Then referrals. And somehow, within a few months, it became a thing. I'm not making a living off it yet, but it's legit enough that I had to get a cottage food permit. I never thought I'd actually be charging people for meals when I started this whole mess. It's also completely reshaped my relationship with food. Cooking used to feel like this tedious, performative thing. Something that real adults did. Now it feels creative, grounding. Some nights, I'll spend hours in the kitchen just trying new recipes. I put on music, pour a glass of wine, and it's like therapy. Maya jokes that I'm soft-launching my redemption arc. Lauren says she's going to start telling people she discovered me like some kind of underground chef. Even my parents have gotten involved. My mom called me recently and said, "Your father told me you're cooking now. Who are you, and what have you done with our daughter?" I sent her photos of my new containers filled with actual food I made myself. She laughed and said, "Took you long enough." As for the original lie, it's become a running gag in my friend group. Anytime someone posts something a little too polished on Instagram, one of us comments, "Okay, Chef DoorDash." It's our shorthand for calling out performative perfection. Like a reminder that nobody has it all figured out, and pretending only makes life harder. Last month, Lauren, Maya, and I went on a weekend getaway to Asheville. On the drive there, we stopped at a cafe, and Maya said, "Remember when you used to fake all this?" I laughed and said, "Yeah, and now I'm the one who meal prepped snacks for the trip." Lauren looked at me and said, I honestly think that whole thing was one of the best lies you ever told. Because look what came out of it. And she's right. That dumb deception taught me more about honesty than anything else ever has. It forced me to confront why I lied in the first place. Because I felt inadequate. Because I was chasing an image instead of connection. Now, I'm not chasing anything. I still order takeout sometimes. But I don't feel guilty about it. I post my messy kitchen photos. My burned toast, my lumpy soup. And weirdly, people love it more than the fake perfection I used to curate. That's kind of become the theme of my life lately. Imperfect but honest. And here's the kicker. Lauren and Maya gave me a Christmas present last year that made me cry. It was a wooden cutting board, custom engraved with, "For Chef DoorDash, the realest fake chef we know." It's sitting in my kitchen right now. I use it every day. So yeah, what started as a lazy workaround to avoid meal prepping became the thing that taught me to actually love cooking. To stop pretending and to embrace who I am, mess and all. The irony is perfect. The lie that started because I didn't want to cook made me fall in love with cooking. I guess the moral is simple. Sometimes being caught in your own nonsense forces you to finally show up as yourself. And when you do, it turns out people like that version of you best anyway. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got a batch of actual homemade chili cooling on the stove. And this time, no takeout bag in sight. Stories number 9. The couple who stole our spot on vacation got exactly what they deserved last summer. My boyfriend and I finally took our first real vacation together after 3 years of saving. We both work stressful jobs. He's a firefighter, and I'm a paralegal. So the idea of a week away in the Smoky Mountains felt like heaven. We rented a cabin months in advance, one of those tucked-away spots with a hot tub, mountain view, and a big wraparound porch where you could drink coffee and pretend life wasn't constantly on fire. We drove 8 hours from Ohio to Tennessee, talking about nothing and everything, taking turns with playlists, stopping for snacks at random gas stations. By the time we reached the cabin rental office to check in, it was around 3 in the afternoon. The guy at the front desk, a middle-aged man named Mark, gave us the keys, a welcome packet, and this huge smile. "Y'all picked a good one," he said. "That view's worth the drive." Except when we got there, it wasn't available. When we pulled into the gravel driveway, there was already a shiny white Jeep parked out front. I thought maybe it was a maintenance worker or something. But when we walked up to the porch, I could hear music playing inside. I knocked, and a woman opened the door like she lived there. Blonde hair, big sunglasses, tank top with some designer logo plastered across it. "Can I help you?" she asked, all attitude. "Yeah," I said. "We rented this cabin." "You might be in the wrong one," she laughed. "No, we're not. We booked this months ago." Then a guy came to the door. Tall, tan, wearing a backwards baseball cap and holding a beer. He put his arm around her shoulder like they were the king and queen of the mountains. "Everything okay here?" I explained again that this was supposed to be our rental. Showed them the email confirmation on my phone. He shrugged and said, "Sorry, must be a mix-up. We got the same one, first come, first served." I guess that sentence, first come, first served, still makes my blood boil. We called the rental office right away. Mark sounded genuinely confused. He said no one else was supposed to be in that cabin and asked if we could wait there while he sorted it out. When I told him they refused to leave, he sighed. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. It took closer to 45. In that time, the couple, whose names we later learned were Chad and Melanie, which felt almost too fitting, just lounged on our porch drinking beers like they owned the place. At one point, Chad said, "You should have driven faster." Man, and I swear my boyfriend Drew nearly lost it. Mark finally arrived and spent a good 20 minutes arguing with them. Apparently, they had booked a different cabin but decided ours looked nicer when they drove by. And since the lock code worked for both, a glitch, Mark later said, they just took it. "I'll get this sorted out," Mark promised. "We'll move you to another cabin for now, and I'll make sure those two are dealt with." The other cabin turned out to be half the size. No mountain view, and right next to a noisy family reunion. Mark apologized profusely and promised us a refund for the first night plus a gift card for dinner. I could tell he was trying, but I was furious. We drove back into town, had dinner, and tried to shake it off. But I couldn't stop thinking about Chad and Melanie sitting on that porch, sipping their beers and laughing. They'd stolen something we paid for and didn't seem remotely sorry. I wanted to let it go, but then I remembered something Mark said when we checked in. All our cabins have smart locks and cameras for security. Just don't cover them. That stuck in my mind. Later that night, while Drew was in the shower, I called Mark. I told him I didn't want to cause trouble, but I was worried the couple might be damaging the property. He paused for a second and said, "You know what? I'll check the security feed." 10 minutes later, he called me back, sounding half amused, half angry. "They're throwing a party," he said. "Friends, booze, even fireworks. That's thousands in fines." I didn't ask what he planned to do, but the next morning, we got a text saying our original cabin would be ready by noon. When we arrived, Chad and Melanie were standing outside, shouting at Mark and a police officer. Their stuff, clothes, beer cans, coolers, was piled up on the porch, apparently. They'd trashed part of the living room, broken a lamp, and left cigarette burns on the deck. Because the cabin was registered under our booking, Mark had all the proof he needed to press charges against them for trespassing and property damage. Drew and I pulled up just as they were being escorted to their Jeep. Melanie glared at me and said, "Hope you're happy." "Oh, I am," I said, smiling. They sped off, leaving behind a trail of dust and a lot of bad karma. Mark comped our entire stay, not just the first night, all 7. He said the company wanted to make it right, especially after how we'd been treated. They even sent someone to restock the fridge and brought us a bottle of wine for the trouble. The rest of the trip was everything we'd hoped for. We hiked. We sat in the hot tub under the stars. We grilled burgers on the deck every now and then. We'd laugh about our house guests and toast to poetic justice. On the last night, I asked Mark what happened with Chad and Melanie. He said the police charged them with trespassing and that the company added them to a regional do-not-rent list shared among several agencies. "They won't be staying anywhere in this county again," he said. I don't usually believe in revenge, but watching those two drive away, red-faced and furious, while we settled into the cabin we'd waited months for, it felt satisfying in a way I can't fully describe. They thought they could just take what they wanted because no one would stop them. Turns out, karma moves pretty fast in the Smoky Mountains, and that mountain view, it was worth every second of the chaos. A few weeks after we got back home, I thought that whole nightmare was behind us. Drew and I were laughing about it one night over dinner with friends, telling the story about how a random couple basically squatted in our cabin for a day and got themselves arrested. Everyone thought it was wild, but funny in hindsight then, one evening, I got an email from the rental company with the subject line, "Follow up on your stay." I figured it was a survey or something, but it was actually from Mark. He said he wanted to let us know that Chad and Melanie had filed a complaint. Against us, apparently. They were claiming we had set them up and spied on them illegally through the cabin's cameras. I almost spit out my coffee reading it. Mark assured me that the company had everything documented. Timestamps, contracts, the booking trail, even the footage of them arriving at the wrong cabin and throwing their little party. "They're just trying to stir trouble," he said. "You don't need to worry about anything." Still, it rattled me a little. A few days later, Drew came home from his shift looking annoyed. "You won't believe this," he said. "Guess who messaged me on Facebook?" It was Chad. His message started with, "Hey man, don't know if you remember me, but we had a misunderstanding at the cabin, like he hadn't been kicked out by the cops." He went on this long rant about how we'd overreacted and cost him a ton of money, and that we could have just worked it out between adults. Drew didn't respond, but Chad kept sending messages for days. One said, "You'll regret what you did to us." At that point, I was genuinely creeped out. I blocked him, and so did Drew. But then Melanie started posting these vague Facebook updates about jealous people ruining vacations and fake victims. It was pathetic. But I started feeling uneasy. Like, what if they showed up again somehow? I called Mark and told him what was going on. He wasn't surprised. Apparently, they'd been blacklisted from multiple rental platforms after other guests filed similar complaints. "They're serial scammers," he said. "They book nice places, move into better ones if they can, trash them, and then claim it was a mix-up." That explained so much. A week later, Mark called again with an update that made my jaw drop. The couple had been arrested back in North Carolina for a nearly identical situation. Squatting in another vacation cabin, refusing to leave, then damaging property when confronted. The local news even did a small segment about it, calling them the Grifters of Gatlinburg. Drew and I couldn't stop laughing when we saw it. Their mugshots were right there on the screen. Same smug expressions. Same fake tan. Karma wasn't just catching up, it was sprinting. But here's where things got weird. About 2 months later, Drew got a random envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single printed note that said, "You think this is over?" No signature, nothing else. I wanted to dismiss it as some prank, But the timing made it hard to ignore. We brought it to the local police just to be safe. They took it seriously since we'd already had that prior incident documented, and told us to keep any further messages or evidence. After that, we installed a few cameras around our house, changed our social media privacy settings, and stopped posting anything that gave away our location. Thankfully, nothing else happened for a long while. Then around Christmas, I got another email from Mark. "You'll love this," he wrote. Attached was a photo of the same couple's Jeep, impounded and covered in stickers from the local sheriff's department. They'd apparently been caught trespassing again. This time at a private campground. Mark ended his message with, "Guess they'll have plenty of time to think about things where they're going." That night, Drew and I poured a couple glasses of wine and sat on the couch rewatching old vacation photos. Every time I saw the cabin's view, the golden light hitting the mountains, the steam from our coffee in the morning air, I felt this sense of peace. Not because of the revenge part, though that was satisfying, but because we didn't let those two ruin something we'd worked hard for. It's funny. You always hear about karma like it's this mystical thing that might or might not exist. But watching those two unravel themselves was proof enough for me. They took what wasn't theirs, lied about it, and kept doubling down even when the truth was right there. And in the end, they didn't just lose a free vacation, they lost their freedom. We booked another trip this year, same area, new cabin, still tucked up in the Smokies. Mark personally handled the reservation and sent me an email that said, "Don't worry, I double-checked the locks." We both laughed when we read it, and for the first time since that chaotic trip, I felt like we could finally enjoy the mountains without looking over our shoulders. It's been a little over a year since the whole cabin fiasco, and honestly, I didn't think there'd be another update. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. After that last trip, Drew and I started traveling more. Shorter, simpler getaways where we could actually relax instead of dealing with drama. We joked that every time we booked a rental, we should ask, "Any known squatters?" Just to be safe for the most part. Everything had been quiet, peaceful even. Then about 3 months ago, out of nowhere, I got a letter from a law office in Tennessee. It was one of those thick envelopes that instantly makes your stomach drop. I thought it was a scam at first, but it turned out to be real. Apparently, the couple, Chad and Melanie, were involved in a civil suit with the rental company and several other property owners they'd scammed. And since we were part of the paper trail that helped expose them, we were being contacted as witnesses. I just stared at it for a minute, half laughing, half groaning. Drew looked at me and said, "You've got to be kidding me. They're still at it?" Turns out the pair had been arrested multiple times since our incident, mostly for trespassing, fraud, and property damage. The DA's office was trying to establish a pattern of behavior, and our experience was part of it. I gave my statement over video call a few weeks later, basically confirming everything that happened that night at the cabin, how they'd taken our rental, refused to leave, and accused us of lying. The lawyer thanked me afterward, saying our report had been one of the first detailed ones on record. Apparently, it helped solidify the case that these weren't one-time mistakes, but deliberate scams. It felt surreal being part of that process, but also kind of satisfying. Like seeing a movie's final act play out and realizing you got to write one of the earlier chapters. Last week, Mark, the property manager, reached out again to let us know the case had officially wrapped up. Chad and Melanie pled guilty to several charges, including fraud and property damage. They're serving short sentences and were ordered to pay restitution to multiple property owners, including the company we rented from. Mark ended his email with, "Guess that view from the Smokies wasn't worth it after all." When I read that line, I smiled, not out of spite, though I won't lie. There was a bit of that, but because it felt like everything had come full circle. The stress, the fear, the bizarre anger we felt that day. It had all led to justice actually being served. That almost never happens in real life, especially with something so random and absurd. Drew and I finally went back to Tennessee this past summer. We stayed in a different cabin, not because we were scared, but because it felt right to start fresh. When we got there, Mark met us in person for the first time. He handed us the keys and said, "This time you can relax. You've earned it." We spent that whole week hiking, cooking, sleeping in late, and watching the fog roll through the trees. There was this one moment, sitting on the porch with Drew, the air cool and quiet, when I realized how different things felt now. Peaceful, unbothered, settled, that whole ordeal taught me more than I expected. I learned that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good in the moment. Sometimes it's messy and stressful and makes you question whether it's worth it. But eventually, the truth steadies itself. And when it does, you realize it never needed your anger. It just needed your patience. Every now and then, when I scroll through my photos and see that first cabin, I think about that couple and how ridiculous it all was. The way they strutted around like they'd won something, when really, they were just delaying the inevitable. Now they're the ones behind bars, and Drew and I are free. Free to travel, to breathe, to laugh about it all without a hint of tension in our voices. We still joke that the mountains remember them, though somewhere out there in the Smokies, that cabin's porch light probably flickers every now and then, like a small reminder that karma's real, and sometimes it shows up with a badge and a warrant. Stories number 10. My family stopped talking to me after I admitted myself into a mental hospital without telling them. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who ended up in a psych ward. But one night, after sitting in my car for almost 2 hours outside my apartment, staring at the dashboard and feeling like my chest was about to cave in, I realized I couldn't keep pretending I was okay. For context, I'm 28 and live in Indianapolis. I've always been the stable one in my family. The one who handled everyone's drama, showed up when people needed something, and rarely asked for help myself. My parents, Carl and Brenda, raised me and my younger sister, Emily, with this unspoken rule that we didn't talk about feelings. We fixed things. We worked harder. We got over it. I guess I believed that for a long time. But over the last year, I started unraveling. My job at a marketing agency had become unbearable. I was working 60-hour weeks under a boss who thrived on pressure. My relationship with my boyfriend, Matt, had been rocky since his mom passed away last fall. He shut down emotionally, and I didn't know how to reach him. I kept trying to hold everything together, but it was like juggling glass. Every day something shattered. The breaking point came after a Friday meeting. My boss ripped into me in front of everyone for a presentation I'd spent nights preparing. I went home that evening, sat on my bed, and just stared at the floor. I couldn't cry, couldn't move, couldn't even think straight. At 2 a.m., I got in my car and drove to the ER. I didn't call anyone. I told the nurse I didn't feel safe being alone with my thoughts anymore. That sentence alone felt like it cracked open years of silence. They admitted me to the behavioral health unit. I stayed there for 6 days. 6 days that felt like months, but in a strange way. They saved me. The first day, I barely spoke. By the third, I was actually talking to the counselor about how exhausted I was from constantly pretending to be okay. The place wasn't what I expected. No one was crazy. Everyone there just looked tired. People trying to make it through another day. People like me who had hit their limit. We did group therapy, coloring sessions, meditation. I met a woman named Janice who had been there before and told me, sometimes you have to fall apart on purpose so you can build yourself right again. When I got discharged, I felt different, fragile, but in a way that made sense. Like I'd been stripped down to my core. I got my phone back, turned it on, and saw 27 missed calls. 12 from my mom, 6 from my sister, a bunch from Matt. The first text I saw was from my mom. "Where are you? You better not be doing something stupid." When I finally called her, she sounded furious and terrified all at once. I told her I'd been in the hospital. She gasped, then said, "You what?" Without telling anyone. "Do you have any idea how worried we were?" I tried explaining that it wasn't something I could plan, that I just needed to go. But she cut me off and said, "You're too old to be making impulsive decisions like that. You could have called your father or me. We would have helped, except they wouldn't have. That's the truth." Every time I've tried to talk about mental health in the past, they've brushed it off. When I had panic attacks in college, my dad told me to take a walk. When I couldn't sleep for weeks during the pandemic, my mom said to just pray more. After that call, I heard from Emily. She was gentler, but still upset. "Mom's been crying," she said. "She thinks you hate us." I told her it wasn't about them. It was about surviving. Then came Matt. He picked me up the day after I was discharged, and I could tell he was trying to act supportive. But there was this tension in his voice. "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling this bad?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer that. Because how do you explain that sometimes the weight gets so heavy you stop believing anyone can hold it for you? He stayed the night, made dinner, even held me while I cried. But over the next few days, he started pulling away. Little things, shorter texts, fewer calls. A week later, he told me he needed space. Said it scared him that I'd gone to a psych ward, that he didn't know how to handle it, so I lost him too. It's been 3 months since I got out. and my family still treats me like I detonated a bomb in the middle of their perfect image. My mom calls occasionally, but it's always surface level. How's work? Or, did you go to church this week? Never. How are you doing now? Thanksgiving's coming up, and Emily told me Mom said she's not sure if I should come, because the kids might ask questions. Like my mental health is something to be hidden in the attic. I've been journaling a lot lately. My therapist, Dr. Owens, says writing helps. Sometimes I think about that first night in the hospital, sitting in the quiet common room, looking out the window at the city lights. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt safe. I don't regret going. Not for a second. It saved me. But it hurts that the people who claim to love me the most can't see that. I don't know if they'll ever understand that I didn't do it to them. I did it for me. And maybe that's what I'm still learning. That sometimes choosing yourself means losing the people who only loved you when you pretended you didn't need saving. It's been 6 months since I was discharged, and things are complicated. To say the least, I've been back at work. Though I negotiated a reduced schedule and some flexibility with my boss, Martin, he's been surprisingly supportive, which is a relief. Because after everything with my family and Matt, I needed at least one part of my life to feel manageable. I still have rough days, but I've been keeping up with therapy twice a week. Dr. Owen says I'm making progress, and some days I actually believe her. The hardest part, though, has been the family fallout. My mom, Brenda, hasn't outright cut me off, but it feels like she's emotionally frozen. Our conversations are surface level, filled with politeness and avoidance. Every time I try to bring up my mental health or my coping strategies, she changes the subject. She still talks about how scared she was when she found out I'd admitted myself, but I get the sense she doesn't really hear me. Emily has been better. At least she's willing to meet me for coffee sometimes. She's been a quiet ally, gently reminding me that Mom and Dad grew up in a world where mental health was considered weakness, not something to treat seriously. But even Emily sometimes hesitates, like she's afraid to push too far and trigger another family crisis. Matt, we haven't spoken since he asked for space. At first, I was devastated. I'd thought he was the one person who could understand. But Dr. Owens reminded me that sometimes the people we expect to support us the most aren't equipped to do so. And that's not my fault. I've started trying to let go of that anger and disappointment, but it's a slow process. The hospital stay itself still lingers in my thoughts. Though differently now, I remember the other patients. People like Janice, who had been through cycles of depression and self-harm, and even the quieter ones who barely spoke but somehow filled the room with presence. I realized that everyone there had reached a breaking point, and by showing up, I'd acknowledged my own. That act, small as it seemed, was revolutionary for me. I've also started opening up to a few friends. My coworker, Lila, has been amazing. She actually shared that she'd been hospitalized for depression years ago. Just knowing I'm not alone has been incredibly validating. I've started attending a support group at a local mental health center, where people share experiences similar to mine. It's humbling and comforting, like walking into a room where everyone understands the language of struggle without needing to explain themselves. Some nights are still hard. I'll wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, thinking about my parents' disappointed voices, Matt's retreating gaze, and the fear I felt that night in my car. But instead of spiraling, I've learned techniques to ground myself. Breathing exercises, journaling, even calling a friend or texting Dr. Owens when it gets too heavy. I think the biggest change is how I feel about myself. Before, I was almost ashamed of needing help. I thought admitting weakness made me less worthy of love or respect. Now I see it differently. Asking for help saved me. Taking care of my mental health is an act of courage, not failure. I've thought about reaching out to my parents in a more structured way. Maybe writing a letter explaining what I experienced, what I needed from them, and how I feel now. I'm scared it won't be received well, but I also feel like it might be the only way to bridge this gap without them feeling attacked. And Matt, I don't know if we'll ever repair our relationship. I'd like to, but I realize it's not entirely up to me. I have to be honest with myself, and accept that some connections may fracture even when we do everything right. Through all of this, I've learned something critical. Surviving isn't just about enduring the dark moments. It's about taking action, no matter how frightening, and reclaiming your life on your own terms. I admitted myself because I wanted to live, and now I'm actively choosing to keep living. With therapy, support, and boundaries in place, I'm scared about the future, as always. But for the first time in years, I feel like I have a handle on my own life. And that maybe is enough for now. It's been a full year since I admitted myself. And I think I'm finally starting to feel stable. Not perfect, not fixed, but steady enough that I can breathe without constantly bracing for collapse. Therapy with Dr. Owens has been life-changing. We've gone deeper than I thought I could handle. I've unpacked patterns from my childhood. How my parents' avoidance of emotions taught me to hide mine. How being the responsible one set me up to believe I couldn't show weakness without consequences. I've cried in ways I never thought possible and, paradoxically, felt stronger afterward. Work is better. I switched to a new team with a manager who actually checks in and supports mental health. I still get stressed, of course. Deadlines don't disappear. But I've learned to set boundaries. I take breaks when I need them, and I've even started mentoring a junior colleague, which feels rewarding in a completely different way than before. Family is complicated. Mom and Dad are slowly softening, though I can't say they fully understand. Brenda called me on my birthday this year, and instead of grilling me or scolding me, she said, "I hope you've been taking care of yourself." That's what matters most. That small shift made me cry for a long time. Emily has become a confidant in ways I never imagined. She asks how I'm really doing and listens without judgment. It's not perfect, but it's progress. Matt never came back into my life, and I've made peace with that. It hurt more than I realized at the time, but I now understand that not everyone is equipped to support someone in crisis, and that's not my fault. I've been dating casually, focusing on myself, and exploring connections that feel mutual and healthy. I feel ready to love again, cautiously but genuinely. I still think about that night I drove myself to the hospital. Sometimes it haunts me. But now, instead of fear and shame, I feel gratitude. That moment was terrifying, yes, but it saved me. It taught me that I am allowed to ask for help, to take radical steps to preserve my life and mental well-being. I've learned that self-preservation isn't selfish, it's necessary. I've also started volunteering at a local mental health nonprofit, helping people navigate crises and find resources. It's surreal to me sometimes. The scared, silent version of myself a year ago would never have imagined helping others while still healing. But being able to share my experience with someone who feels trapped, who doesn't know where to turn, makes me feel like maybe my struggle wasn't in vain. The most profound change, though, is how I feel about myself. I am no longer ashamed of my limits. I am no longer afraid to say, "I need help." I'm learning that vulnerability doesn't make me weak. It makes me human. I have scars, emotional ones, and I carry them proudly, because they show I survived. Some nights, I sit in my apartment with a cup of tea, thinking about everything I've been through. I think about the friends I leaned on, the strangers who offered understanding, the nurses and counselors who stayed patient with me, the therapists who guided me back to myself. And I think about my younger self in that car, frozen and panicked, wondering if she'd ever be okay. I finally can tell her, "You will be okay. You are not alone. And one day, you will learn to love yourself, scars and all." I don't know what the future holds. Maybe my family will never fully understand me. Maybe I'll have setbacks. Maybe relationships will come and go. But I do know this. I am resilient. I am alive. I am allowed to live fully, even with everything I've been through. And for the first time in my life, that feels enough. Stories number 11. My boyfriend's mom ended up in handcuffs after she stole from me. And now his whole family hates me. I never imagined my relationship would end with me standing in a police station, shaking, watching officers haul away my boyfriend's mother in handcuffs. But here we are. I, 29F, had been dating Chris, 31M, for almost 3 years. We met at a friend's game night. He was charming. Funny, kind, and honestly, a little too good to be true at first. But as the months went on, he proved himself. He was patient, attentive, and didn't mind that I worked long hours as a nurse. He cooked, did laundry, and made my life feel easier in a way I hadn't experienced before. After about a year and a half, we decided to move in together. I owned a small townhouse that I'd bought before we met, and since he was paying off student loans, I told him he didn't have to rush to split the mortgage. Just utilities and groceries. It worked for us. Then, about 6 months after we moved in, I met his mom, Patty, 58F. From the start, she gave off this overly friendly but subtly judgmental energy. She'd say things like, "Oh, honey, this is such a cute little place," in that tone people use when they really mean small. She also constantly referred to me as the girl Chris is living with. even after I corrected her that I was his girlfriend. Still, I tried to get along with her. Family's important to Chris, and I wanted to make an effort. She'd come over for dinner every couple of weeks, sometimes bringing leftovers or random thrift store finds. I'd always thank her and smile, even though her gifts were sometimes bizarre. Like an old candle shaped like a clown or used throw pillows that smelled faintly of cigarettes. But then things started going missing. At first, it was small stuff. Some cash I kept in a kitchen drawer for emergencies, a pair of earrings my sister gave me, a few of my skincare products. I figured I misplaced them. I'm scatterbrained sometimes, especially after long shifts. But one day, I came home to find my grandmother's gold bracelet missing from the jewelry box in my bedroom. That bracelet wasn't worth a fortune, but it meant everything to me. My grandmother gave it to me before she passed away. I tore the whole place apart looking for it. Chris helped me search, but it was nowhere to be found. Then something clicked. Patty had been at our house that morning. She'd stopped by to drop off soup while I was working. Chris had let her in before he left for his shift. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my gut told me something was off. I asked Chris if he noticed her near our room, and he said, "No, she just used the bathroom and hung out in the kitchen." Still, that didn't sit right with me. I let it go. At least, I tried to, until 2 weeks later, when I saw a Facebook post on Patty's profile. She'd posted a photo of herself at brunch with friends, wearing my grandmother's bracelet. I stared at the picture for a full minute before I could even breathe. It was unmistakable. Delicate gold links with a tiny heart-shaped clasp. I zoomed in to be sure. There it was. I called Chris immediately. I could tell he didn't believe me at first. "Are you sure it's the same one? Maybe it's just similar." But I was sure. I knew that bracelet better than anyone. That night, I showed him the photo in person. His face fell. He muttered something like, "Jesus, Mom," and said he'd talk to her. The next day, he came back saying she didn't mean to take it, that she thought it was something I left behind during a visit. Which made no sense. Since it was in my jewelry box, in my house, I told him I wanted it back immediately. He said she'd mail it over. A week went by. Nothing. Another week. Still nothing. Every time I brought it up, Chris said, "She's working on it," or, "I don't want to push her right now." So I pushed. I messaged Patty directly. I said, "Hi, Patty. I saw the bracelet you were wearing in your Facebook post. That belonged to my late grandmother. I'd like it back, please." She left me on read. That's when I decided to stop playing nice. I went to the local pawn shops, and sure enough, at the second one, I found a small velvet pouch with 3 of my missing jewelry pieces inside, including the bracelet. The owner showed me the sale log. Patty had sold them for less than $100 total. I remember feeling cold all over, like my body wasn't even mine. I took photos of everything, got a copy of the sale receipt, and went straight to the police. I wasn't even thinking revenge. I just wanted my things back. They opened an investigation, and within a week, they contacted Patty. She apparently denied everything until they showed her the shop's security footage of her selling the items. She was charged with petty theft when Chris found out. He was furious, not at her, at me. He said I went too far, that I could have let him handle it as a family. I told him I did let him handle it. For weeks, and he did nothing. That turned into the biggest fight we'd ever had. He accused me of humiliating his mother. Said I should have just dropped it after getting my stuff back. I told him it wasn't about the things. It was about trust. About how his mom stole from me and he let her. He packed a bag that night and went to stay with his brother. His whole family turned on me almost immediately. His sister texted me saying I ruined Patty's life over some jewelry. His aunt posted some vague Facebook rant about ungrateful women who destroy families. I didn't respond to any of it. I just focused on work and healing from the chaos. Patty ended up doing community service and paying restitution. Chris came by a month later to pick up his remaining stuff. He looked tired, like he'd aged 10 years. He said, "You know, you could have just told me how much it meant to you," I told him. "I shouldn't have to explain why stealing is wrong." We stood there in silence for a while before he finally said, "I guess we just see family differently." And that was it. He walked out, and I haven't seen him since. For a while, I doubted myself. I wondered if I really had taken things too far. But then, every time I looked at that bracelet sitting safely back in its box, I remembered why I did it. I wasn't the one who crossed the line. Patty did. And Chris chose to look the other way. Funny thing is, that bracelet doesn't feel quite the same anymore. It used to remind me of my grandmother's warmth and kindness. Now, it also reminds me of the moment I realized love isn't enough when someone refuses to stand up for you. Still, I wear it sometimes, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that boundaries matter. Even when they cost you something you thought would last forever. Alright, here's the long update for that story. Things got way more complicated after Patty's arrest than I ever expected. After Patty was taken in and charged, the fallout with Chris and his family was immediate and brutal. At first, I thought maybe Chris would eventually see reason, that he'd realize his mother had done something wrong, and that my actions were justified. But instead, he doubled down on defending her. He'd text me things like, "I can't believe you let this escalate," or, "Do you even care that Mom's life is being ruined?" I ignored most of them. I couldn't argue with someone who was actively refusing to see reality. The harder part was dealing with the rest of the family. His sister, Jenna, 33F, went nuclear on social media. She posted vague, cryptic things about people who destroy families over petty stuff, and tagged Chris and everyone. Even Chris's dad, Richard 62 called me a homewrecker during a phone call that lasted longer than it should have. The weirdest moment was when his aunt, Debbie, 57F, showed up at my doorstep unannounced with a peace offering of cookies. She tried to play the martyr. "I just wanted to meet the girl Chris is dating." I don't know why things got so ugly. I was polite but firm. I told her I wasn't interested in any cookies or conversations. She left, muttering something about how young people have no respect anymore. Meanwhile, I was still recovering emotionally from the whole incident. Seeing Patty in the police station, handcuffed and shouting about how dare I, was surreal. I'd never thought I'd be in a position where I literally caused someone I dated's parent to get arrested, and part of me still felt guilty about that. Even though rationally I knew I'd done the right thing. The most painful part, though, was Chris. Before all of this, I genuinely thought he was my partner in life. I imagined a future with him, shared holidays, vacations, maybe a house someday, and then suddenly, I realized he would side with his mother over me every single time. That was the moment I understood that love isn't enough when trust and boundaries are violated. A few weeks after the arrest, I went through my apartment, making sure everything I owned was safe. I put locks on my bedroom drawer for the first time ever, and I started keeping my more valuable things in a safe. I even installed a small security camera by the door. Not because I wanted to spy on anyone, but because I needed to feel secure in my own space. Work became my refuge. I leaned on my coworkers more than ever, and a few close friends came over for dinner, helping me take my mind off the chaos. One night, my friend Maya, 30F, said, "You know, you did what most people are too scared to do. You didn't just sit there and take it, you stood up for yourself." And it stuck with me. Chris eventually stopped contacting me altogether. I didn't reach out either. It hurt. But I knew I couldn't be with someone who couldn't protect me from the people who were supposed to love me. Patty's trial was another surreal experience. I didn't have to testify, thankfully. But I showed up to ensure she didn't try to intimidate me in person. During the trial, she looked enraged, like I had personally ruined her life. The jury didn't buy it, obviously, and she was sentenced to probation, restitution, and mandatory counseling. Seeing her leave the courtroom with a scowl on her face was oddly satisfying, but not in a petty way. It was just the closure I needed. Months later, I started moving on. I met someone new, someone kind and grounded, and I realized I could still love and trust again. Just differently. I'm careful with boundaries now. I don't let people take advantage, and I don't tolerate deceit. I also learned to value myself in a way I hadn't before. That bracelet, my grandmother's gift, isn't just jewelry anymore. It's a symbol of the line I drew, the courage it took to stand up, and the lesson that protecting yourself is never wrong. The moral? Sometimes the hardest actions are the right ones. You might lose people you care about, and you might face anger from unexpected directions. But in the end, your integrity is worth far more than appeasing someone else's sense of family loyalty. It's been over a year since Patty got arrested, and honestly, life has started to feel normal again. Though normal now has a lot more boundaries, locks, and selective trust than it used to. Chris and I never got back together after months of silence. I realized he'd never truly stand by me if it meant confronting his mother. Loving someone who chooses family over you in such a blatant way is heartbreaking, but also clarifying. I've come to accept that some people simply can't prioritize your well-being over their own comfort or loyalty. After everything, Patty's been out of our lives completely. Probation and restitution aside, she hasn't reached out, and that's fine with me. The awkward thing is, even when she's gone, Her presence still lingers in the memories of what happened. The phone calls from Chris defending her. The snide comments from Jenna. The social media posts from Debbie. For a while, I found myself replaying every interaction, wondering if I could have handled things differently. But looking back, I can honestly say I acted in the only way that would have protected myself and my belongings. My apartment feels like a safe space now. I reorganized everything, added extra security, and put the most valuable items in a small safe. Every time I glance at my grandmother's bracelet in its box, I smile. It's more than jewelry now. It's a symbol of standing my ground. I also noticed a shift in the way I approach relationships and boundaries. I'm more cautious about family dynamics and how much influence someone's relatives can have. I won't tolerate theft, manipulation, or passive-aggressive control, not from a partner, and definitely not from anyone else. It's a lesson I learned the hard way, but it's stuck. Interestingly, the situation helped me build stronger bonds with my own friends. They were there for me through the stress, the arguments, and the aftermath. One night, my best friend Jenna, not Chris's sister, just my friend, because apparently every story needs someone named Jenna, came over and said, "Honestly, you did the right thing. Most people wouldn't have had the guts to do what you did. You don't deserve to be treated like that by anyone." Her words hit me harder than any lecture or argument I had with Chris or his family. I also started therapy shortly after the incident. I realized I had carried a lot of guilt and self-doubt from being accused and attacked by Chris's family. Therapy helped me see that the fault was never mine. It gave me tools to handle conflict without internalizing other people's toxic behavior, and it helped me rebuild confidence in my judgment and instincts. Chris eventually reached out one last time. He sent a long message explaining that he was still hurt and conflicted, that he loved me but felt trapped between me and his mother. I replied once, briefly, thanking him for his honesty but explaining that our paths had diverged. That was it. No back and forth, no begging, just closure. Life has moved on in unexpected ways. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping people who'd been through abusive or manipulative relationships. It's ironic. But that experience with Chris's family helped me empathize with others in ways I couldn't have imagined. I feel like I'm channeling that pain into something positive. I've also been dating again. Slowly, cautiously, but in a way that feels healthy. My new partner, Ethan, 32, is aware of the whole situation and completely supportive. He admires that I set boundaries, and he's never once made me feel guilty for protecting myself. It's refreshing, and it's allowed me to heal without fear of betrayal. The family drama is gone, and in a way, I feel like I'm finally living life on my terms. I still see reminders now and then, the social media posts, the occasional awkward glance from extended family, but they don't affect me anymore. I've stopped wondering if I did the right thing. I know I did. Sometimes people ask me if I regret having Patty arrested. The answer is no. It was the only option that ensured my safety, my peace of mind, and my belongings. The fallout hurt in the moment, but it was temporary. What remains is clarity, independence, and a sense of self-respect that I wouldn't trade for anything. So now, when I look at that bracelet, or when I think about Chris and his family, I feel a strange mix of relief and pride. Relief that they no longer have a hold over me, and pride that I trusted myself enough to take action. I lost a relationship, sure, but I gained something far more valuable. My own strength, boundaries, and peace. At the end of the day, sometimes standing up for yourself is uncomfortable, messy, and lonely, but it's also the only way to truly live free. And that's exactly what I've done. Stories number 12. My brother's secret changed everything. I never thought I'd be in this position, sitting here replaying something I wish I could unsee. It's been a few weeks, and I still haven't told anyone. Not my parents, not my friends, not even my boyfriend. Every time I think about it, I feel sick. I keep telling myself there has to be some kind of explanation. But deep down, I know what I saw. My brother Evan is 26, I'm 24. We've always been close, not the kind of siblings who talk every day, but we check in often. We grew up in a small town in Ohio, and we were each other's only real ally through all the family chaos. Our parents divorced when I was 10, and he was 12. Dad moved to Texas, Mom stayed, and Evan took on a kind of protector role. After college, he moved back home for a bit to save money. And that's when we really reconnected. We'd grab beers on Fridays, rant about work, and laugh about stupid stuff from our childhood. I always saw him as the good one, reliable, kind, the one who'd give his jacket to a stranger. That image shattered 3 weeks ago. I was visiting home for the weekend. Evan was staying there temporarily again. Mom was letting him crash until he found a new apartment. Saturday night, I was helping Mom in the kitchen while Evan was upstairs. I left my phone on the counter next to his because they were identical models. Same case. Even when mine buzzed, I grabbed the wrong one by mistake. It took me a second to realize it wasn't mine, but by then, the screen had lit up with a text preview from someone named Kara. It read, "She looks scared in that one. Delete it before someone sees." I don't know what made me freeze. Maybe it was the tone. Or maybe it was because I'd never heard Evan mention anyone named Kara. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I opened the messages. The thread was full of photos, blurry, dimly lit, obviously taken without someone's consent. A girl, young, maybe 16 or 17, sitting on a bus, walking through a grocery store, leaving what looked like a library. None of them were obscene in the way you'd think, but they were invasive. And Evan had sent some of them. The captions made my skin crawl. "She looks even younger today. Wish she'd look at me." My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the phone. I didn't even hear Mom ask if I was okay. I mumbled something about feeling sick and went upstairs. Evan's door was half open and he was on his computer. I stood there for a second, just watching him, trying to see the person behind what I'd just read. He looked normal, headphones on, snacking, laughing at something on YouTube. I went back downstairs and didn't say a word. That night I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. My brother, the guy who once stood up for me in high school when a teacher embarrassed me, was sending creepy pictures of random girls to someone named Kara. The next day, I acted like nothing was wrong. I had to. Mom's the kind of person who panics easily. And I didn't want to blow things up until I was sure. When I got home that evening, I sat in my car for almost an hour trying to decide what to do. I wanted to confront him, but what if he denied it? What if he flipped it around and said I violated his privacy? I spent the next few days quietly digging. I remembered that Evan had posted a picture a few weeks ago at a local coffee shop, so I went there pretending I was just grabbing lunch. I noticed one of the baristas. She looked just like the girl in the photos. Same backpack, same face. My stomach dropped. I sat in my car across the street trying not to throw up. That's when I saw Evan's car pull into the lot. He parked, got out, and walked inside. I couldn't move. I just sat there, watching through the windshield as he ordered, laughed with her, and then lingered near the counter like he was waiting for something more. He didn't notice me that night. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. I kept hearing that text. She looked scared in that one. I decided to talk to him. I drove back to Mom's house the next morning, told her I needed to grab a few things, and waited until Evan came downstairs. He smiled when he saw me, like everything was normal. I asked if we could talk and he shrugged. When I told him I saw his messages, the change in his face was instant. He didn't get angry, not right away, but I could see him calculating. He tried to laugh it off at first, saying, "It's not what you think," and that he and Kara were just messing around. I told him there was nothing funny about taking pictures of a minor. That's when he snapped. He stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. "You went through my phone?" He shouted. "You think you're better than me?" It scared me. I've never seen that version of him before. He stormed out before I could say anything else, got in his car and left. Mom came running in asking what happened. But I lied and said we'd just argued about money. I haven't seen him since that day. He stopped answering my texts. Kara's number is disconnected. 2 days later, I went to the police. I didn't give them everything, just what I saw and what I knew. They said they'd look into it, that it might be nothing, but if there was cause, they'd reach out. That was 2 weeks ago. I feel guilty. I feel sick. I feel like I betrayed my brother, but I also know I did the right thing. The idea that he might have hurt someone, or even wanted to, is unbearable. I keep hoping I'll wake up and find out it was all a misunderstanding, that Kara's some bot, that the photos weren't what I thought, that Evan's just stupid, not dangerous, but deep down I know better. And that's what's breaking me the most. It's been almost a month since I went to the police, and the tension hasn't let up. Every time I hear my phone buzz, my stomach drops. Not knowing if Evan has been questioned or if Kara is safe eats at me. I keep imagining the worst, and it feels impossible to focus on anything else. Mom has noticed I've been quiet and distracted. She keeps asking if everything's okay with Evan, and every time she does, I feel a stab of guilt. How do you tell your mom that the brother she raised, the one she thinks is perfect, is potentially dangerous? That he's someone who could hurt a kid? I just smile and tell her he's fine, that we had a little argument. She believes me, and I'm grateful, because I don't want her to worry. But it also isolates me. I can't tell anyone else either. Not my friends, not Drew, because the more people know, the bigger the risk if Evan finds out. The police called me a few days ago. They said they were looking into some messages and trying to verify identities, but they couldn't tell me much else. That uncertainty is worse than anything. I keep imagining that he's out there, still doing whatever it is I saw, still thinking no one will stop him. I've started checking social media obsessively. Any new account he's created, any photo posted online, any tagged friends, I analyze everything. I know it sounds obsessive and probably unhealthy, but I can't stop myself. I just want to know Kara is safe, or at least that Evan isn't continuing whatever he was doing. Last night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to a notification on my phone. It was a Facebook friend request, from a name I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me open it. The profile had no posts, no friends except one mutual, Evan. My heart sank. Could it be him creating a new account to cover his tracks? Or worse, reaching out to Kara or someone else? I blocked it immediately, but the paranoia is sticking. Drew noticed something was off again. He asked if I wanted to talk, and I almost told him everything, but I couldn't. I just said work's been stressful, and he nodded. But I could see the worry in his eyes. I hate that this is consuming me so much that I can't even confide in the person closest to me. I've considered confronting Evan again, but I'm terrified. Last time he snapped, I felt a version of him I've never seen before. Angry, defensive, almost predatory. I don't know what would happen if I push him too hard, especially knowing what I know. Some nights I can barely sleep. I keep imagining Kara's face, or the photos I saw, or Evan laughing at some twisted joke I'll never know. I feel trapped between loyalty to my brother and doing the right thing, and every day it feels like the balance is slipping. I've also started documenting everything. Every text, every strange social media account, every weird interaction. Part of me hopes that if the police need more proof, I'll have it. The other part of me hates that I'm slowly turning into a detective in my own family. The worst part, I don't know how long this will go on. I don't know if Evan will be caught, if Kara is okay, or if I'll ever feel safe around him again. Every time I see his car in the driveway, my heart races. Every time my phone buzzes, I flinch. I feel like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. I don't know how much longer I can carry this burden alone. I want to do the right thing, I really do. But right now, it feels like I'm stuck in a nightmare with no escape. Just watching pieces of my brother I thought I knew crumble into something I can't recognize, and hoping I'm strong enough to survive it. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I still don't know how to process everything. The situation with Evan has escalated in ways I didn't think were possible. After the last time I went to the police, they finally called me back to say that Kara had been located and was safe. She's a minor, and because of her age, they couldn't share much information. All I know is that she's no longer being targeted, and that authorities are monitoring Evan closely. That relief is almost unbearable. The weight on my chest finally lifted slightly. But it comes with this gnawing emptiness. I can't shake the fact that my own brother, the person I trusted most in my life, was capable of something so disturbing. Evan has not come home since the police interviewed him. Mom hasn't spoken to him either. She told me she feels betrayed, shocked, and heartbroken. My parents have always emphasized family loyalty, but this was different. They both told me they support whatever I think is necessary. Even if it means pressing charges, I never thought I'd hear them say that about their own son. I've spoken with a counselor to help process everything. I realized that I've been carrying guilt for seeing the messages, guilt for reporting him, and guilt for hoping he faces consequences. My counselor reminded me that reporting the abuse isn't betrayal, it's protection. The right thing isn't always easy, and the right thing often comes with consequences that hurt the ones we love. The police called again last week. Evan has been arrested and charged with multiple counts of child exploitation and harassment. Hearing his name on the other end of the line, knowing that justice is finally moving forward, was surreal. I felt a rush of relief, fear, and grief all at once. The brother I grew up with, the one I protected as a kid and trusted implicitly, is now a stranger in the eyes of the law. Mom and I met with the police to provide more information. I showed them all the screenshots I had taken, every strange account, every creepy text. They were thorough, professional, and gentle, but their words hit me hard. You did the right thing. You may have prevented further harm. That made me cry. I hadn't realized the extent to which I carried the possibility that someone else might be hurt because of him. Drew has been my rock throughout all of this. He never pressed me for details I wasn't ready to share. He listens, supports, and makes me feel safe, like I can finally breathe. Some nights, when I wake up thinking about everything, he holds me and reminds me that I did what I had to do, that I saved someone from harm, even if it cost me my sense of normalcy. The hardest part now is processing my own grief. I keep thinking about Evan as both the brother I knew and the person who hurt others. Reconciling those two images feels impossible, but I'm learning that it's okay to grieve the brother I thought I had, while also accepting the person he truly is. That duality is uncomfortable, but it's real. I've also started slowly reclaiming parts of my life that fear had taken from me. I go out with friends again. I spend time with my family, I laugh, I work, and I try to focus on things that aren't Evan. I remind myself that while I can't undo the past, I can live fully in the present and ensure I do my part to protect others in the future. Mom is leaning on me a lot now. She tells me often that she's proud of me, that I did what no one else could. Hearing her say that brings tears to my eyes every time. It's strange. Half of me feels broken by the betrayal, and half of me feels strong for having faced it. Evan is going to court soon. I don't know what his future holds, and frankly, I don't want to. What matters is that the immediate danger has passed, that Kara is safe, and that justice is finally moving forward. I've accepted that I can't fix him. I can't make him the brother I thought I had, but I can continue to live my life, safe, aware, and determined not to let his actions define me. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him, not for myself, not for my own peace of mind. But I am starting to forgive myself for everything I couldn't control, for seeing what I shouldn't have, for reporting it, for the sleepless nights, and for learning that sometimes the right choice is the hardest one. I'm still scared sometimes, and I probably always will be in some way. But I'm learning to carry that fear without letting it rule my life. And that's the closest I've come to peace since discovering what my brother had been hiding. Stories number 13. My husband died. I lost my home. I started making soap in the middle of the night, and somehow it saved me when my husband Mark passed away. The world didn't just crumble, it dissolved. One day I was a wife with a shared bank account, a shared bed, a shared future. The next, I was a widow with bills I didn't understand and a house I couldn't afford. The silence after he was gone was the worst part. It was thick, like it wanted to swallow me. Mark and I had been married 12 years. He was steady in all the ways I wasn't, patient, calm, the kind of man who read manuals before putting anything together. He'd been sick for only a few months before cancer took him. I kept telling myself we'd pull through, but when I woke up to his side of the bed still made, I knew we wouldn't. I tried to hold things together. I really did. But grief doesn't care about deadlines or mortgages. The insurance money barely covered his medical bills, and my part-time job at a library didn't stretch far enough. When the bank sent the foreclosure notice, I packed what I could into boxes and left the house where we'd built our life. I slept in my car for 3 nights before my friend Jenna offered her couch. Jenna was one of those people who'd never run out of kindness. She made coffee every morning, even when she had to leave for her nursing shift before sunrise. She'd leave me little notes on the fridge. Eat something today. You're doing better than you think. But at night, when she went to bed, I stayed up. I couldn't sleep. My brain wouldn't stop looping through what now? What now? What now? It started with a YouTube video. Some woman making handmade soap in her kitchen. She mixed oils and lye like it was magic. I don't even know why I clicked it. I'd never been into crafts. But watching her pour the mixture into molds, seeing the swirls take shape, it was calming, controlled, predictable. Everything my life wasn't. So one night around 2 a.m., I bought a starter kit online. It arrived 2 days later in a brown box that smelled faintly of lavender. Jenna raised an eyebrow when she saw it, but didn't question me. I cleared a tiny space on her kitchen counter, lined it with newspaper and started mixing. The first batch was a disaster. The lye splashed, I burned my wrist, and the scent was so overpowering that Jenna came out of her room coughing. But even though it looked terrible, there was something about it that hooked me. The process, the stirring, the waiting, the quiet transformation felt like therapy. Within weeks, I was making soap almost every night. I'd experiment with scents. Oatmeal honey, peppermint eucalyptus, lemon verbena. I'd carve designs with an old butter knife, wrap bars in paper, and line them up like little soldiers on the counter. Jenna joked that her apartment smelled like an herbal apothecary. One morning, her neighbor, Lisa, came by while I was cleaning up. She picked up a bar and said, "This smells incredible. You selling these?" I laughed. "No, just keeping busy." But she handed me a $10 bill anyway. "Well, you are now." That's how it started. Lisa told a friend. That friend told her sister. Within a month, I had people messaging me on Facebook asking for custom orders. I didn't even have a name for what I was doing. But Jenna helped me set up an Etsy page. We called it Silver Lining Soapworks. She said it sounded hopeful. The orders trickled in, then picked up faster than I expected. I'd package each bar carefully, tying them with twine, slipping handwritten thank you notes inside. The nights were still long, but they weren't empty anymore. The rhythm of mixing, pouring, and cutting kept me grounded. One day, I got a message from a woman named Kelly who ran a small boutique downtown. She said she'd found my Etsy store and wanted to stock my soaps. I almost didn't believe it until I met her in person. She was young, bright, all business. She handed me a wholesale contract right there in her shop. I signed it with trembling hands. That first month, the boutique sold out. Then another shop reached out. Then a farmer's market invited me. I was still working at the library, but now I had something to look forward to when I got home. Something that didn't feel like grief. It wasn't just soap anymore. It was proof that I could still create something good. A few months later, I moved into a tiny apartment. The living room doubled as my workshop, filled with molds, oils, and boxes of packaging. The place always smelled like lavender and vanilla, and for the first time in a long while, that scent felt like home. Sometimes I'd talk to Mark while I worked, not out loud, just quietly, in my head. I'd tell him about new scents I was trying, about the customers who wrote me kind notes, about the way I finally slept through the night. I liked to think he'd be proud. Jenna came over one evening, leaned against the counter, and smiled at the rows of soaps lined up to cure. "You know," she said, "you built something beautiful out of all that pain." And I realized she was right. The thing about soap is that it's made from harsh ingredients. Lye can burn, oils can spoil, but when they're blended with care, they become something that cleans, heals, restores, just like me. Update. It's been a little over a year since I wrote that first post. I didn't really plan to come back, but tonight I'm sitting in my studio. My studio, not Jenna's kitchen. And it just feels like the right time to tell what happened next. When I hit post on that story, I didn't think anyone would read it. It was more like a letter to myself. Something to mark the point where I'd finally stopped drowning. But people did read it. A lot of people. I remember refreshing the page and seeing hundreds of messages from strangers who told me that they'd lost someone too, or that they'd found healing in unexpected ways. I cried that night, not because I was sad, but because I didn't feel so alone anymore. After that, I kept making soap, but something shifted. It wasn't just survival anymore. I started treating it like a business, something worth protecting and growing. I spent evenings learning how to build a real website, took a small business course at the community college, and even registered Silver Lining Soapworks as an LLC. The first big moment came last winter, when I was invited to a holiday market downtown. It was freezing, my fingers were numb from tying ribbons, but people kept stopping by my table. One woman, Claire, said she recognized the name from Etsy, and had driven 2 hours just to meet me. She told me she'd been gifting my Citrus Calm soap to everyone she knew because, in her words, it smelled like starting over. I don't know if she realized it, but I nearly cried right there behind the table. A few weeks later, I got an email from a buyer for a regional home goods chain. Her name was Denise, and she said she'd found my soaps through a local boutique. She wanted to stock them in 6 of their stores. I almost deleted the email because I thought it was spam, but it was real. She called me the next day, walked me through the process, and by spring, my soaps were sitting on shelves in actual stores. It was surreal. Seeing something I'd made with my own hands, something born out of sleepless nights and grief, lined up in a bright display under the words, "Handmade with love in Colorado." I wish I could say I handled it all perfectly, but there were rough moments too. The demand outgrew what I could do alone, and I started burning out. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to mix batches before my shift at the library, then stay up late labeling and packing. I stopped answering calls, even from Jenna. One night while I was cleaning up, I accidentally spilled a full batch of lye solution on the floor. It hissed and smoked, and I just froze. I remember sitting on the floor, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. That was my breaking point. I realized I couldn't keep doing everything alone. So I did something I hadn't done since Mark died. I asked for help. Jenna, being the saint she is, didn't hesitate. She showed up the next weekend with pizza and cleaning supplies and said, "We're hiring someone." And we did. Her cousin, Evan, had just finished college and was looking for part-time work. He'd never made soap before, but he learned fast. He's been working with me ever since, and honestly, I don't think the business would have survived without him. With Evan handling production and Jenna helping me organize orders, I finally had time to breathe again. I even started going to a grief support group that met at a local church. That's where I met Tom. Tom was a quiet guy with kind eyes and a voice that sounded like he'd been through too many long nights himself. He lost his wife 2 years before in a car accident at first. We just talked after meetings, about books, recipes, how weird it felt to live in houses that were suddenly too quiet. Then we started grabbing coffee, then dinner. I wasn't looking for anything romantic, honestly. The idea scared me, but it just happened naturally. He never tried to fix me, never told me to move on. He just listened. He understood the silence. 6 months later, he helped me move into a bigger space, a little storefront on Main Street that used to be a florist's shop. It's now Silver Lining Studio. There's a work area in the back, shelves up front with all the soaps, and a tiny corner with a sign that says, "Take what you need." Free bars for anyone going through a hard time. That part was Tom's idea. Last week, we had our 1-year anniversary of opening the studio. There was a small celebration. Jenna brought cupcakes. Evan made a new lavender blend just for the occasion, and my parents even flew in from Oregon to see it. It was the first time in years that the air felt full of laughter instead of grief. I still think about Mark. I think I always will. There's a small photo of him on one of the shelves, next to the very first crooked, ugly bar of soap I ever made. I keep it there to remind myself that healing doesn't happen all at once. It's messy and uneven and sometimes burns before it soothes. Some nights, I'll catch myself looking at that photo, and instead of the ache that used to hit me, I just feel this quiet kind of peace. Like maybe he's still with me somehow. In every batch, every scent, every person who tells me that my soap made them smile on a bad day. I guess if there's one thing I've learned, it's that grief doesn't disappear. It transforms. It takes the shape of the life you build after loss. And if you're lucky, sometimes it smells like lavender and honey. Final update. It's strange how quietly life shifts from survival to living. When I first wrote about losing Mark, I didn't believe there could be an after, even when things started to turn around. I still felt like I was walking through the ashes of someone else's life. But now, 3 years later, I wake up each morning to a life that's mine, built slowly, softly, one small act of creation at a time. Silver Lining Studio isn't just a soap shop anymore. It's become something bigger, something alive. We moved into a larger space last spring. A sunny old building with creaky wooden floors and big front windows that smell faintly of rosemary and cedar. There's a small workshop in the back, a display area in the front, and a table by the window where customers can sit and make their own soaps. When I opened the doors for the first time, there was a line outside. I'll never forget it. People holding coffee cups and wearing scarves, chatting and smiling, waiting to come inside and smell things I'd made with my own hands. I stood there with Jenna and Evan, both of them grinning like idiots, and I just started crying. Happy tears, the kind that sting because they come from someplace deep. Evan now runs the production side full-time. He's got a head for logistics and a passion for precision I'll never have. He keeps everything organized. Formulas, curing times, suppliers. He jokes that I'm the soul, and he's the spreadsheet. Jenna still helps too, mostly with events and marketing. She's the one who convinced me to start holding weekend workshops, and they've been more successful than I ever imagined. People come from out of town just to make soap and talk about life. Sometimes they share stories that sound eerily like mine. Loss, change, starting over. We light candles, play soft music, and talk while we mix oils and lie. There's something about creating with your hands that makes people open up. It's not therapy, exactly, but it feels like it. I've watched strangers comfort each other over a batch of lavender soap, wiping tears with the same towel they used to clean their hands. And Tom, he's still here, still steady, still kind. We moved in together last summer. He built me custom wooden racks for curing soap, sanded smooth and smelling faintly of pine. He's also the one who convinced me to start donating part of the profits to local shelters. Every month we drop off boxes of soap and hygiene kits at a women's shelter downtown. Sometimes the women there recognize me from the shop. One woman, Alicia, told me that using one of our bars made her feel a little human again. I don't think she knows how much that meant to me. Tom and I talk about the future sometimes. He never pushes, never rushes, we've both lost before, and we both know that love isn't about filling holes, it's about growing roots. He makes me laugh again, which is something I didn't think was possible for a long time. He has a daughter, Sophie, who's 11, and she spends weekends with us. She loves making soaps shaped like stars and hearts, and insists on naming each one. My kitchen table looks like a glitter factory exploded, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. The funny thing is, even though life feels full now, I still talk to Mark sometimes, not out of sadness, just gratitude. I'll be driving home after closing the shop, windows down, radio humming softly, and I'll say, "We made it, didn't we?" It doesn't feel strange anymore. It feels like keeping a promise. There are still hard days. Of course, grief doesn't vanish. It just stops steering. Every year on his birthday, I make a small batch of morning rain, the first scent I ever perfected. I pour it into simple molds and leave a bar on the windowsill to cure. It's a quiet ritual, a reminder that from loss, something beautiful can still grow. Last month, I was invited to speak at a local entrepreneurship event. Me, standing on a stage, telling a room full of people about soap and grief and second chances. I was terrified. But when I started talking, it just flowed. I told them how I'd begun in the middle of the night, lost and heartbroken, and how creating something small saved me when nothing else could. When I finished, the room went silent for a moment before they stood and clapped. Afterward, a woman came up to me. Her name was Rebecca. She told me she'd lost her husband last year and hadn't been able to get out of bed for months. "I read your first post," she said. "The one about making soap. It made me believe there might be something after this." Then she hugged me, and we both cried right there in the lobby. That moment, more than the shop, more than the sales, more than anything, felt like the real success, because it meant the thing that saved me could ripple outward and maybe, just maybe, save someone else too. A few weeks ago, I found an old box in storage from when I left the house Mark and I shared. Inside was the notebook he used to keep grocery lists in. On one of the pages, in his handwriting, were the words, "Remember, everything good starts small." I don't know when he wrote it, or why. But I keep that page framed now, hanging above the work table in the studio. Every time I look at it, I think about that first messy, burned batch of soap in Jenna's kitchen, about the nights I thought I'd never stop crying, about the strange, unexpected path that led me here. Life didn't go the way I planned, but maybe it went the way it needed to. If you'd told me 3 years ago that I'd build a business out of grief, find love again, and help others do the same, I would have laughed through my tears. But here I am, and every time I open a fresh batch, breathe in that mix of oils and earth and warmth, I think, this is what healing smells like.